Good morning. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners to order for Tuesday, October 6, 2015. And I'd like to begin today's meeting with a moment of silence for the victims and the families, the Umpqua Community College community, the Roseburg community, and Douglas County. Thank you. First item on the agenda today is adjustments to the agenda. I'd like to note that we have one item of emergency business and that there will also be an exec session, but that exec session will be after our work session tomorrow, and that we have a 10 a.m. time certain today. So with that, are there any other adjustments to the agenda? Seeing none, then we'll move on to public comments. I have two people signed up for public comment. When you're called, if you'll come up and give your name and where you're from, and then you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. And the first person I have signed up is Ray Crump. Right there. Thanks.
My name is Ray Crump. I'm from Florence. Hear about my daughter. She has schizophrenia. She's been missing since Thursday, and she was last seen in the emergency area of the hospital. And while we argued about whether she should be committed or not, she took off. And it's not the first time she's disappeared. She's lived in Compton for a year and a half, Vegas. She's been a lot of places. So it doesn't surprise me that she would take off, but the reason I'm here is because of the moment of silence we had just before I spoke. Something we better get used to if we're not dealing with mental illness the way it ought to be dealt with, which is caseworkers, daily care, and treatment. And if all we're doing is waiting until somebody explodes, the time bomb explodes in a shooting or somebody gets victimized, which is what we're doing now. And I specifically want to mention Shangri-La, who has been the caregiver, if you would call it that. But the last place they took her was a dumpy motel in Springfield. That drugs and everything would be easy to access from the point that they dropped her off. And as soon as she disappeared from there, they cleaned the room out, washed their hands of it, and went about their business. So all I'm here to say is we got to change it. People are dying as a result of lack of care, and there needs to be follow-up care. There needs to be a database nationally where mentally ill people are tracked and not incarcerated all the time, because many times they don't need it. But when they do need help, it's serious. And I have called the police out many, many times when she lived at my place and had them say it's not bad enough yet. Well, screaming at the woods and yelling at invisible voices isn't bad enough to get you care. It's only when you commit a crime, and then you end up in the privatized prison system that we've created. So I guess if I was going to make a recommendation in 3 minutes, I'd say take 30 or 40% of that privatized money for prisons and put it into hospitals and foster care and effective treatment. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Next we have Mary, I think it's Borby.
Well, I have to say my heart goes out to Mr. Crump, because I work a lot with the mentally ill too through my church. So I think that is something that needs to be addressed also. Although I'm here, I'm a park user.
State your name and where you're from for the record.
Yeah, Mary Borby. I'm a Lane County Parks user and on a Parks Advisory Committee. And I came here in September 1st meeting, I believe it was, about releasing the master plan to get public comment. And I've gone to all but the Florence public meeting, and I can say I don't think the turnout for Veneta or Harris Hall was that great. And I would like to bring to your attention the community calendars that have been put out for the information. This one is for the McKenzie, which is tonight. And the bold letters are public comment on Buford Park. So you're going to a meeting up in Leesburg, and the headliner is public comment for Buford Park. I imagine a lot of people up there don't even know where Buford Park is. The same headline went out for the Veneta. Now, Veneta's got at least 2 parks that are considered for large events. Okay, there's nothing on here that says any of the parks around that area. The reason we're having public meetings in certain areas is for certain people who are interested in those parks to come and give us comment. And that's why we released the Parks Master Plan, the new plan, early, so we could get public comment, so we could then make the plan stronger. We're not even getting people out to them. This is in print. And I think Mike Russell, who's sitting here, has been put in a terrible position to try to raise money for our parks. Okay, I don't see how it's a win to put large events in them. I think that the task force that was charged to do that has done a tremendous job. I mean, it is a solid piece of work as far as I'm concerned. But I just think that our Parks Department management team has been put in a terrible position of raising funds for thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of public land in our parks. And if you want them left for our children, then we've got to come up with some kind of a resource. I think it's terrible what's happened. And I don't think that this is the way to get public involved. You're not going to get hardly anybody there for the parks up the McKenzie tonight. I went to Veneta. 3 people out of, I don't know how many were there, not many, were from, 2 of them were the moorage guides, I guess, or moorage holder, or not holders, the people that are at the moorage place at Richardson. That was 2, and the other one was a woman who runs all of Richardson, Sarah. So that was 3 out of what I saw, probably a max of 12. And when you get to these parks meetings for Veneta and Leesburg, and its headliner is public comment on Buford Park at the McKenzie Highway, and then in regular small print is public meeting to discuss Lane County drafts update on the Lane County Parks and Open Space Plan. That's probably an inch down from the bold print for comment on Buford Park. Now, I substitute teach when I want to, thank God. And I was out at Veneta this last week, and I asked some of the kids if they knew where Buford Park was. They didn't have an idea. Why would their parents come to a meeting? You know, and I'm not faulting anybody here, but there needs to be some more oversight on some of this publicity. The reasons we're having these meetings is to get public comment, but the public's not coming. So I think it's something you really need to look at. The city parks, they've got a whole headliner. City's residents' opinions on parks. It's right here. Came out in September 11th paper. I mean, we need to get the word out. We're holding these meetings for the public. The public's not coming, not from what I've seen. So that's all. Thank you.
So I saw a couple folks wander in after we collected the public comment. Oh, there we go. And it looks like we have Kevin Matthews who would also like to address the board.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for taking public comment today. I'm Kevin Matthews. I live at Swan Farm in Dexter, and I can be reached at kevin@friendsofkevinmatthews.org. Side comment, when other local governments use this space, they have a countdown clock for people giving comments so people can self-regulate and know how to pace their comments. It'd be great if the county could provide a countdown clock at the podium too. What I want to talk to you about today is another kind of below the radar issue about open government. It appears you have an item on your agenda today about raising fees for access to the county mapping system. It's a small item. It's probably looks like a small amount of money. It would be easy to rubber stamp it and keep going. I want to ask you to take a closer look at this, and I particularly want to challenge Commissioner Stewart, who represents the geographically largest district in East Lane County, and I think the poorest, most disadvantaged district in East Lane County. The county has had a pay-to-play system for access to map information, referred to by the acronym GIS, which stands for Geographical Information Systems. Sounds like nerdy stuff, but with pay-to-play, businesses, developers, extraction operators like the McDougals can pay to get those maps. It's a business write-off for them. It's a small cost of doing business. I work around the county with a lot of grassroots people, neighborhood associations, from the Churchland neighborhood to CV Loop, up the watersheds of East Lane County. Nonprofits and private citizens don't have a tax write-off. They have to pay out of pocket. There's no profit when they're defending the quality of their communities. So many other communities have long since taken the perspective that the public pays for the creation of mapping data in its governments. The public should have free access to that mapping data. It's an established open government process all across the United States, but not here in Lane County. So rather than focusing narrowly on the costs of maintaining the pay-to-play system, I want to ask you to think about moving in the other direction toward open government, toward equal access for the grassroots people as well as the big shots. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board this morning? If not, we'll move on to Commissioner's response to public comments and or other issues in remonstrance. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate this. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for the moment of silence this morning, and thank you for that. As people know, I actually was born and raised in Roseburg, Oregon, and lived there growing up. Actually still travel down there quite a bit, as my family continues to have quite a bit of business down there. And so instead of going down during the pomp and circumstance time on Friday, I chose to actually make some personal visits yesterday. And I visited with the commissioners there. Also have been in contact with friends and family as well. And one thing I will say, and I'm not going to, I think one thing we need to understand right now, this is a very fluid investigation. It's very fluid. In fact, with the FBI and the ATF both being involved the way they are, I think it's really appropriate to, instead of, let's not speculate on what to do at this point in time, but instead focus on the community as a hand, at hand. I will say many people that I knew growing up still live there, and Douglas County is a very strong community. In fact, Douglas County, the population is actually less than the city of Gresham, and it's about 107,000 people. But it's a very close-knit group, close-knit family. I've been amazed on what you hear as far as that's concerned, and how people have really come together. You know, unfortunately, it takes me back a little bit to 1998 and in Springfield at Thurston High School. But I will say this is a little bit different. This was an adult male who actually was enrolled in class. Apparently had moved here just about a year ago and did not grow up here, was not from here. And again, that piece of it is very fluid on the investigation side. But, you know, for those who do have beliefs, and even if you don't, prayers and thoughts are going to be very important going through you know, when somebody gets up in the morning and is going to class and then their life is cut short, we're going to be asking questions all throughout this time. And it's probably asking the same question over and over again will drive us to be a little bit crazy ourselves. So a couple stories. In fact, a person I think many of us in this board know him personally. His niece is actually Miss Woodworth, who is at Peace Health right now, and probably at this point in time, if she survives, she will not have a normal life. And talking to my cousin, and this is when it hits you directly, talking to my cousin, her daughter's best friend was one of those who was killed. And by the way, she was at UCC studying to be a pediatric nurse and didn't have to pay for it because she was a straight A student. She was there on scholarship. Her older sister was on scholarship at Oregon State University. Didn't have to pay for her education because she was a straight A student. And so I think, and I for one, and I got to tell you, I'm a little bit incensed on folks going out on Facebook and other things suggesting that President Obama should not come. In my opinion, he should, and I think the plan is on Friday, and I'm actually glad he is going to come because I think it's important for him to meet the families that are there. I had a good conversation yesterday with a couple of the commissioners. There's a lot of information out there that's not reality, and that's why I say let's wait until the investigation ends and comes out before we start making judgments on what's going to happen. But, Mr. Chair, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to speak to this. I was not a city councilor. In fact, it was just a few months before I was a city councilor in Springfield when the Thurston High School shooting happened. But again, you know people. In fact, my sister-in-law was a teacher, a math teacher, and still is at Thurston, and then all of a sudden this happens. And I just ask that we continue to if you believe and you want to pray, please pray, and if not, your choice is to keep the folks in your thoughts. They're going to need people just to really be there to comfort. And anyway, Mr. Chair, I appreciate you allowing me to speak to this. Thank you.
Welcome, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Lycan. I'll speak to that very briefly. I spent much of the day on Saturday with Bill Morissette, who was the mayor of Springfield when you were a city councilor during that period of time, and of course Bill was stricken in the heart by the shootings in Douglas County, and I think we all feel it a different way. We all feel it a very, very different way. I have kids. My granddaughter is a student at Lane Community College. Gives me, I don't have words. I don't have words. So I'm not even going to try. It's just absolutely breathtaking to me. But it leads up to one thing that I was going to talk about very specifically, and that is, Mr. Crump, thank you for being here today. You're pointing out some issues that are really on the very front burner on high right now. That behavioral health issues, something that we have to pay a great deal of attention and devote a great deal of resource to at this point in time. You're pointing out your very specific situation, and in fact, you mentioned that you're not the only person who is suffering from the type of event that you just described regarding your daughter being missing, schizophrenic, was undergoing treatment, defining the future treatment, and came up missing. My heart, once again, is with you. I feel and see your pain and anguish as a parent. Behavioral health is something that we have to pay a great deal of attention to, because your daughter, if we begin to put the right kinds of resources into a broad spectrum of behavioral health, then your daughter may not ever have been placed in the situation that she was in. You described a dump motel that wasn't clean, that exposed her to other elements that potentially could have drawn her into substance abuse. We have to get around that. We have to address that full head on. In the last legislative session, we had a bill that got traction, and we're going to run through it again regarding housing first for people with substance abuse and behavioral health issues. It's something that we have to pay a great deal of attention to. internal auditor, our performance auditor, did a broad list of assessments of different departments in the county, and number one on the list was behavioral health. Not because we have a poor staff, not because we have a poor facility, not because we have a poor response, but because we don't put enough resource into it. Because we need to put more resources into behavioral health. It's going to make everybody's job easier. It's going to make our very insufficient primary care providers' job a lot easier. It's going to make our very insufficient deputy sheriffs and sheriff's department a lot easier if we take care of behavioral health issues at the start before they escalate into very expensive and very costly, humanly costly events such as the one that you are describing. You know, we have to work on behavioral health. Last week, behavioral health is, you mentioned substance abuse. Behavioral health is substance abuse. Behavioral health is inherent mental illnesses, some of which can be treated with chemically treated. Some of them need to be treated with can be treated with counseling. All of them need a stable living home situation. All behavioral health issues, if we can put people in stable living home situations, not expose them to dump motels that are going to exacerbate their issues, and not expose them to having to live either in a tent or under a bush. Find ways to put people who need that sort of help into immediate care. We can do it publicly, we can do it privately. Last week I toured the new campus of Serenity Lane. Serenity Lane is addressing behavioral health issues by helping treat people through treatment. People are not going to get treatment if they're not living in secure, stable housing situations. Thank you for being here today, Ms. Crump, and Godspeed and God bless you. Pray that your daughter is home soon and in your care. So thank you for being here today. And Ms. Gorby, did I get that right, Ms. Gorby?
Roby.
Oh, of course, I know your name. Thank you. I'd like to show you this report right here that I received my copy of it yesterday. You see notes all over it. It's the findings and recommendations of the Lane County Large Events Task Force. We're going to be discussing this this month right here, the findings and the recommendations from the task force. I'm not going to talk about any of them right now because it's all in discussion, but I will mention one thing. You talked about public outreach. Public outreach is a difficult thing. It's hard to get people to come unless it's a pothole outside their driveway. You know, it's really hard to get people to come, so we have to focus very closely on what is it that people will hear you say in order to get their attention. And I think you pointed out some interesting points, you know, talking about Buford Park when it's in Veneta. I think those things are relatively easy to address, and we have some excellent professionals in our public outreach team that are going to, you know, that have listened to you, and will, while it doesn't help for this particular issue, it's going to help us down the road. So thank you for bringing that up. But I'd like to point out just one thing about this. I talked with Mr. Russell yesterday. We send out a survey to get people's opinion on this, and the surveys, mail surveys can work, maybe sometimes don't work. We sent out, we received almost a 40% response on the survey that we sent out on this. So we did say it in terms that people understood when they got their written surveys. And so we've gotten a lot of public input on this, even though the town halls, if that's what we would like to call them, weren't as well attended as we'd like to be. A lot of input's gone into this, a lot of work, thousands and thousands of hours of your time and other people's time have gone into preparing this document that we're all going to be seeing this month. So we're moving in the right direction. We'll hang a lantern on it. We'll talk about it broadly and up front. And the work has not gone to waste by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it's a highlight of my time on the City Council, is the report that we're going to be reading this month here at the City Council. State legislature. The county commission, of course. So thank you very much for being here today, and thanks, and thank you for indulging me with more time than I normally would take. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. On October 1, 2015, the White House Office of the Press Secretary released a statement from President Obama, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it is on the White House website. And it's a statement by the President on the shootings at Umpqua Community College, Roseburg, Oregon, James S. Brady Press Briefing Room. There's been another mass shooting in America, this time in a community college in Oregon. That means there are more American families, moms, dads, children, whose lives have been changed forever That means there's another community stunned with grief, and communities across the country forced to relieve their own anguish, and parents across the country who are scared because they know it might have been their families or their children. I've been to Roseburg, Oregon. There are really good people there. I want to thank all the first responders whose bravery likely saved some lives today. Federal law enforcement has been on the scene in a supporting role, and we've offered to stay and help as much as Roseburg needs for as long as they need. In the coming days, we'll learn about the victims, young men and women who are studying and learning and working hard, their eyes set on the future, their dreams on what they could make of their lives. And America will wrap everyone who's grieving with our prayers and our love. But as I said just a few months ago, and I said a few months before that, and I said each time we see one of these mass shootings, our thoughts and prayers are not enough. It's not enough. It does not capture the heartache and grief and anger that we should feel. And it does nothing to prevent this carnage from being inflicted someplace else in America next week or a couple of months from now. We don't yet know why this individual did what he did. And it's fair to say that anybody who does this has a sickness in their minds, regardless of what they think their motivations may be. But we are not the only country on earth that has people with mental illness or want to do harm to other people. We are the only advanced country on earth that sees these kinds of mass shootings every few months. Earlier this year, I answered a question in an interview by saying, the United States of America is the one advanced nation on earth in which we do not have sufficient common sense gun safety laws, even in the face of repeated mass killings. And later that day, there was a mass shooting in a movie theater in Lafayette, Louisiana. That day, somehow this has become routine. The reporting is routine. My response here at this podium ends up being routine. The conversation in the aftermath of it. We become numb to this. We talk about this after Columbine and Blacksburg, after Tucson, after Newtown, after Aurora, after Charleston. It cannot be easy for somebody who wants to inflict harm on other people to get his it cannot be this easy for somebody who wants to inflict harm on other people to get his or her hands on a gun. So I won't read the rest of it, but it does encapsulate my perspective, and I'm one of the commissioners who was here in 1998 when a gunman killed kids at Thurston High School. I'm one of the commissioners who was part of the greeting group when President Clinton came, and I was part of the motorcade from the airport to the school, and to see the victims a few months after the incident. It's just something that lives with you forever, and I wish we could do better.
Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for their comments. This last week during the shooting, that made me think a little bit. I hauled my daughter up to college this year, up to Mount Hood Community College. And for several months, we toured the Umpqua Community College, and for several months I'd hoped my daughter would go there so that she could live at home and be close. But so as a parent in that situation, I can fully understand the grief and the emotions and the situation that these people are dealing with, not having experienced it firsthand, but to understand it. And my heart and prayers go out to them. Mr. Crump, I wanted to share that this board has been, in my opinion, super engaged in our developmental and behavioral health issues. We understand that we don't have enough resources to do what needs to be done. Actually, tomorrow we have a work session upstairs in the conference room at 9 o'clock to talk more about the system and hopefully see if there's things that we can do I served on the Public Safety Coordinating Council for many years, recognizing that we didn't have the resources to help people that are in our jail for mental health, and that there should be a better way to do it. One of the frustrating pieces is that we didn't have the professionals in our community to actually provide the service. When we had some few resources to hire to try to get people help, we didn't even have the option to hire people. Commissioner Bozovich has now taken over that responsibility. The state has allocated more resources, and we're actually able to purchase more and more services, which is, maybe just it's just a pittance of what needs to take place. But we're engaged, and we're trying to find ways to provide more and better service to those folks. I truly hope that you find your daughter safe and sound soon, and that we can find ways to help you get better service. Mary, thank you for coming in and sharing the news articles or the advertisement pieces. Unfortunately, one of the things I've learned, actually a couple things in this position, is that we can supply information to the newspaper. The editor and the people that put it in there the way they choose to put it in there. So I don't know if I can fault our staff for not, putting it out there right or the way that we intended it to be, because the newspaper takes their freelance to do it. I will say that I'm very, thankful for our staff and the work that they've done. I personally received a card, and I don't think that I was chosen because I'm a commissioner. I believe we tried to send out cards to every resident that we knew of in the county to participate in giving comments. I personally have been on the radio the last, I have a monthly show at KNND, and I personally announce the last 2 months that please come make comments. I think we're trying to do our best. It is rather disappointing. I held a series of 12 town hall forums on public safety, thinking that public safety was important to the citizens I served in my district, and I averaged 4 people that showed up for those 12 meetings. So obviously I haven't, and we're trying to find ways to reach out to the citizens, whether it's social media or anyway. So I understand your frustration, and I believe our staff's doing the best that they can to get people here. We just can't make them do it. Mr. Matthews, I appreciate you coming in today and calling attention to an item on the consent calendar. I'm not sure if you're aware, but Lane County has been more aggressive in doing GIS services. We used to purchase a great deal of our services from LCOG. LCOG is also a fee-based organization that charges for their services. I wish we had the capacity and the ability to provide services for people for nothing. I wish we could process permits in the building department. I wish we could do a lot of things that are burdensome and trust me, I know are difficult for the citizens that I serve to pay. I did notice that in the item today that we went to a lower rate, a $75 per hour rate. These are customized maps that people come in and specifically need. They're not just off the push a button and we charge them $75 to push a button. They actually take time to do. We also removed our fee for our bicycle map and for our road and recreational map. There's no fees now for those. So in areas that I think are appropriate, we're trying to offer services for free. But if folks come in, and this is not specifically citizens, we have a lot of government bodies, we have agencies that come to us to produce maps, and the fee is so that we can recover our time and also provide a service that helps us keep that service active in our community and in our portfolio. If we didn't charge the fee, we wouldn't be providing the services and we wouldn't be able to do it, period. So unfortunately, that's the reality that I'm faced with, and if you have some better ideas on how to do it, I would appreciate you sharing those with me, and work with you to try to implement no fees for services. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll start out maybe addressing the issue of notification on some of these meetings. Just last week, I had a series of community conversations out in West Lane. They were in the Siuslaw News. They were on KCST. I put them out on Facebook. I had 4 people in Mapleton, 5 people in my first one in Florence. My afternoon meeting had 0. We got 1 in my evening meeting. And my afternoon and evening meetings, I had the auditor with me, and it was well advertised as the auditor events. It just, you can't make people come to a meeting. In addition, the meetings in Veneta, I put up on Facebook, and I specifically mentioned Zumwalt and Richardson and Perkins Peninsula in my notice out to the folks. I'm on about 5 different Veneta Elmira Facebook groups, one of which has over 1,000 members. You just can't make people come to a meeting, unfortunately. And unfortunately, we can't control what the press puts out a lot of times. We send them a notice, they put it in once or something, they forget to change a piece of it as they re-put it in. You know, anyone that's around the news industry now understands how critically understaffed, you know, our news industry is, and the changes that the internet's brought about to both print and even television and radio news media, and how understaffed they are. So I don't quite blame the Guard for getting it wrong, but you know, that's just something that happens. But I believe we've made as much outreach as you know, personally possible. And you've heard from 2 commissioners that have reached out to our communities personally in various ways to try and get people to attend those meetings and to give us the input that we need to develop a good plan. I will say I have gotten more emails about the draft parks plan than any other subject over the last 2 months. So we must be doing something right. And I forwarded all those emails on to the park staff and Public Works Director and our county administrator, so they are in the record. So something we're doing in our outreach is right, because that's been my dominant email subject. Just a few comments. You know, Mr. Crump, I appreciate you coming in. We've talked personally on the phone. I've passed your voicemails and the issue over to our mental health staff. Yeah, one of the frustrating things is the family of somebody that's that mentally ill has a desire to have that person treated, and sometimes that person really isn't at the same place the family is. And there's that mismatch in where they do things like disappear at times. You know, my stepfather was a psychiatrist, my sister's a psychiatrist. I've also got 2 brothers that are in recovery. So I really understand this, you know, the issues of mental health pretty well. Yesterday at our Association of Oregon Counties, we had a District 5 meeting, which is Lynn, Benton, and Lane County. The dominant subject at that meeting, that 4-hour meeting, was mental health. And we're not alone in the frustrations of trying to provide that service. The other counties are dealing with the same issues. The intersection of mental health and homelessness, the intersection of mental health in our jails and our criminal justice system, we're all struggling to try and make that work better. Fortunately, there's been some nice changes at the legislature. You know, House Bill 3194 has actually provided us a grant source of revenue that we've been able to tie some of our mental health services together with our criminal justice services, because they're grants specifically intended to keep people from the prison system ultimately. And one of the ways you do with that is dealing with them before they get far enough into the system to go to prison. So, and there's been some increases on the state as far as funding goes, but I don't think there's been enough. And it's an issue that we just are lacking resources. And the providers, you know, we're not getting enough providers into the system, you know, primary care providers on the mental health side. We're doing a lot, though. You know, we're co-locating mental health with our physical health in our federally qualified health clinics. You know, we're tying things together between our jail and our parole officers and our mental health system, where we're dealing with warm handoffs between the system, where somebody's ended up in the jail system for behaviors that are due to a mental health condition. So we're trying to improve the system. There's a lot further we can go. And incidents like the UCC incident show that we're just not doing enough right now. And it's really about getting to those people and providing that mental health care. And you know, as a former Lane Community College board member, I really understand, and can't imagine what it'd be like to be a part of that college's administration or faculty or any of their staff, or be on the board down there, the suffering they've had. And you just kind of wonder how somebody like that has slipped through the system for so long. And really, I hope some of the work we're doing, we passed a behavioral health and criminal justice system plan unanimously a few weeks back. We're working on our community health improvement plan, and I think one of the big things we're stressing in that is mental health. We're talking about developmental disabilities and some of those issues tomorrow in a work session. It's a heavy focus for Lane County government to try and get to this issue and resolve it. And at the same time, it's something we're working with the legislature on pretty heavily. I know you and I talked about Val Hoyle's bill, because one of the things that's happened through the system is the pendulum swung really far in the individual right of somebody to refuse treatment versus our ability to commit and protect them from themselves for refusing that treatment. So we have to swing it back a little bit, yet we still have to be responsive to the Olmstead Act, and the issues that come from the federal government and some of the decisions around not warehousing people that are mentally ill either. So very complex system, very complex solutions, all require a lot of resources, and the more resources we can get, the better off that system will be. So I hope we can, I truly wish that your daughter shows up and we find her safe and healthy, but she's just one of many stories like that. And it's an unfortunate situation, and I hope that we can do better in the future, and that we're doing things to make our system more efficient and more integrated, and that we do better in the future. So with that, we'll move on to emergency business. We have one item under emergency business, 4A1, Order 1510-0605, in the matter of approving an increase in appropriations in the Park and Open Spaces Special Revenue Fund 216 in the Department of Public Works and in the Parks and Animal Services Division in the amount of $55,000 from a FEMA grant for repair of the dock abutment in Westlake Park. And we've got Mike Russell here. Chief Russell.
Good morning, Board. Thank you for allowing time on your agenda this morning for this item. We just received FEMA approval for the project, so we weren't able to include it in our budget allocation, just your recently adopted budget for this year. So we're asking for it now. We have bid the project, and the bid award is awaiting budget allocation. So that's why this is an emergency. Parks is unable to proceed with the project without budgetary authority to spend the money and then get reimbursed from FEMA. So FEMA has authorized the project, and then now we need to execute. So the sub-grant award from FEMA, that information is in your board packet. The dock repair will address a safety concern with damage that was sustained to the dock abutment in 2012, in a storm in 2012. All other project authorizations are in place except for the budget authority. That's it.
Any questions for staff? Mr. Farr.
Thank you, Commissioner Chair Bozovich. Mike, can you describe where Westlake Park is?
It's south of Florence, and it's on Silk Goose Lake.
On Silk Goose Lake. All right,
Yeah.
very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Mr. Stewart.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of Order 15-10-06-05 in the matter of approving an increase in appropriations in the Parks and Open Space Special Revenue Fund 216 in the Department of Public Works in the Parks and Animal Services Division in the amount of $55,000 from a FEMA grant for repair of the dock abutment at Westlake Park.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion of the motion? I'd just like to say good job to staff for obtaining the grant for needed repair. There's no further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Moving on to the consent calendar, and these are items that are considered to be routine by the Board of Commissioners and are enacted in one motion with no discussion. And if you want details on each one, you can go to our website and click on View Materials to see the packet behind each item. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Mr. Chair, I'd move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So moving on to County Council. Do we have any announcements from County Council other than the exec session tomorrow?
I don't believe so.
I believe that Council Dingle was going to have a packet for the board, or is that coming out later in preparation of tomorrow's exec session?
I can check with him at a break, yeah.
Okay. You mentioned that at agenda setting last week. If there's no announcements, then we'll move on to county administration announcements, and Mr. Mokaiski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I guess I'll talk for a few minutes here. We have a time certain at 10 o'clock.
Yep.
And I do have a few updates for you, just in addition to the comments that the board shared about in response to the public comments that were made. I wanted to just add, related to the public engagement on our Parks Master Plan and large events work, and in addition to these open houses that we've had on the master plan, we've had a lot of public engagement on the large events task force work. I think, as the board understands, over 1,000 comments we've received. We've done surveys, we have had open houses, online engagement. The large events task force met about 20 times over the past nearly year and a half. This was a citizen volunteer group, diverse representation from our community who's volunteered their time on that effort. And again, we collected over 1,000 comments from our residents on that effort, which of course will feed into that master plan process that we're going through currently. Commissioner Farr mentioned that we're going to be bringing that item back. Our plan is in early November, so tentatively we're planning to bring the board an update on the large events task force work in early November, and we look forward to that work. The large events task force has now wrapped up its work. I think I mentioned around 20 meetings they had, and they took a final vote, unanimously voted from the members who were at that last meeting on the recommendations. I will review those, and then we'll bring an update and recommendations to the board on that. I wanted to also add, Commissioner Stewart responded to the comment on the GIS fees and did an excellent job outlining really what was happening with those fees. And the last time those fees were updated was 2011. We've had a shift in operation from Public Works to Information Services for our GIS function. We did eliminate fees for 3 services that are provided, and actually reduced and set an actual customization fee at $75 per hour. Also, I want to share with you, as I'm able to do once a month, I have a SAC lunch in different county department, and a couple weeks ago I met with the Human Services Division, and it was a great opportunity to sit and chat with the staff in Human Services. Their goal is to build stable lives. Very simple. Build stable lives in our community. And there are 5 areas in Human Services, including the Veterans Services Office, Worksource Lane, Family Mediation, the Energy Assistance Program, and Poverty and Homelessness. So we had an opportunity to talk about the services provided there. And I'll tell you, and I'll share just a few things, because I think, we need to talk more about some of the outstanding work that Lane County is providing, and our workforce and our employees are contributing to our community every day. Our Veterans Service Office is #1 in the state in terms of productivity, in getting claims resolved from the VA, #1 in the state. They average about 38 interactions per day with veterans and their families. You have some communities around the state who can average around 6 interactions per day. So we've seen a big increase in the number of interactions that we're able to have at 38, in large part because of the efficiencies that staff has created. They now host, in addition to set hours at scheduled meetings, they also have several days of open hours, so veterans and their families can drop in, and that has actually created more efficiency and flexibility for our customers and for the staff to respond to those needs. We spend time in Florence every Thursday, so our Veteran Service Office is in Florence every Thursday. Then we also have office hours in Cottage Grove, Oak Ridge, LCC, and the University of Oregon. So they do a great job of getting around and making sure that we provide outstanding service and connecting veterans and their families with VA services. The WorkSource Lane operation helps to develop our workforce and do training opportunities, employment and training services. Our family mediation, which is court-funded, works with custody disputes, family checkup services, and restorative justice. Our poverty and homeless staff, in addition to the Poverty and Homelessness Board that they work with local nonprofits and provide funding and coordination. And then, of course, I mentioned our energy assistance program that works with people to provide energy assistance there. So outstanding work happening with our human services staff, and I just wanted to note that and thank them for their great work. And another thing I wanted to share with the board, we had a health fair last week. I was out of town at a conference last week, so I wasn't able to attend, but I understand the commissioners were there getting your flu shots and showing some leadership on that. We actually had over 500 flu shots that were given at our health fairs so far this year, and that's really outstanding. A lot of participation, we've talked a lot about health and wellness in Lane County recently with our shift to a self-funded health plan, with our investment in wellness, with the new employee clinic that is coming online, with our Race Around the World Challenge that we've implemented. We have 239 Lane County employees who are participating in Race Around the World efforts, and you see people carrying around, I'm going to put it in my pocket here. I hope I have it. My daughter might have stolen it from me. It's little Fitbits, right? So we've given these out, and others. Commissioner Bozovich showed his Fitbit that he has, and so this is a challenge, an incentive for our employees to compete against each other in a fun and active way. And we have a great competition going on, and people at the health fair and as I go around the county are pulling out their Fitbits and talking about how many steps they had and how they've increased their activity and their healthiness, and that they're generally just thinking about health and wellness. And that was really the goal of that effort. So one of many things that we're doing to focus on health and wellness, and we're going to continue that going forward. So those were we have a few minutes. I can just keep talking, or you can.
Commissioner Stewart.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I wanted to share with you, and it has to do with veteran services. I agree 100%. We have a great group of folks over there in veteran services, and I wanted to share specifically an incident. I think I mentioned it about a year ago at this time that I had bumped into a homeless veteran in Cottage Grove down in Bohemia Park, and I just happened to drum up a conversation with him and found out that he was homeless and didn't have a place to live, but that he was a veteran and that he had connected with the hospital to get some services. And he was pretty rough looking individual and looked like he could use a little help. So I actually asked our staff how to connect this individual to services, and they did. They were able to connect, and I bumped into him just a week ago, once again at Bohemia Park, and he thanked me for connecting him with veteran services, that his life is much better. He actually acquired housing down in Florence, and he was kind of on a walkabout to go back to his, back through some of his neighborhood while the weather was good. Talked about how great he was able to do fishing, and how improved his life was. So, I mean, just asking a question, or if fate has it, you bump into somebody and you're able to connect them to the great people that we have here at the county, can make a huge difference in people's lives. So, thanks, Jovi and staff, for the great work that you do.
If I can just tag on to that a little bit, one of the veteran services came up at our district meeting yesterday, and one of the things that was noted, it was it was brought up in the context of a report on the last legislative session, was that we did get an increase in the funding for VSOs, or veteran service officers, from the legislature this last time, from I think it was like 3.3 up to 4.4 million. they also handed out a report on the benefits that come from veteran service from the federal government to Oregonians. 2.5 billion last year in benefits come to Oregonians. And in Lane County, I can't remember the exact number, but it was an amazing amount of money that comes in compared to what we spend on the veteran services folks, and I think we even spend some general fund on that. But one of the interesting things was they had a county-by-county breakdown of the increase in funding year to year, and Lane County's had gone up almost 17%, which was above the state average considerably. And I credit that to the great work of Joby and the folks there and our staff, and that efficiency you mentioned. Another thing I'd like to, you mentioned workforce. That also came up as a hot topic of the other two counties, because in the reorganization, they are with other counties. They didn't get their, one of the things that's nice about being as big as Lane County is we are our own region. When they started to regionalize the workforce partnerships under the new federal laws. And both Lynn County and Benton County are struggling when it comes to workforce. The Benton County's connected with coastal counties. They are still working on their setup of their workforce partnership and their governance and everything else. They haven't really even gotten it off the ground. Benton County's is having issues to the point that the Albany Chamber of Commerce is actually doing workforce training within the school system outside of that for the metals industry, because they can't get the services they need out of their workforce. And yet our guys are just, didn't even skip a beat in the transition in the new governance system. And when I'm, was meeting with a potential employer that was thinking about coming to Lane County, we're able to talk about our workforce partnership and the work they do and the training they can provide, and when they ask about workforce and the ability, to get employees. So we're very fortunate in how we've been able to benefit from being a standalone county in a lot of ways, but also just starting with a good organization and the transition, how well it's been managed by H&HS. So really want to appreciate both those things, our veteran services and our workforce folks. Going and talking with other counties sometimes makes you appreciate how well we do with what little we have. And we do a great job with what little we have because we have great staff. Any other questions for the administrator? Well, we are about 3 minutes ahead of schedule. And I'm getting the nod from Carrie that she's got everyone here she needs. So I think we'll go ahead and move on to item 7B, which is a report from Travel Lane County, and it's their annual report. And we have Carrie Westland here, and I think after she gets done handing out stuff, we'll be right on 10 anyway. Okay. Go ahead. Hurry up. And see, we're not right on 10. I'm going to let Commissioner Farr run off for a second.
How to get there?
I'm sure we're on county business. I want the one with the seacoast cover.
Did you look?
It might not, but here's one on here. Okay.
Oh, look at that, seacoast and cycling all on the same cover.
So we're going to walk through the deck that you received in your board packet today because it is jam-packed, full of information. And then I will give you a few updates. I want to introduce folks that are in the room. We've got our adventure crew in the back aisle, Samara Phelps, who's our Director of Stakeholder Relations, Dana Terrell, President and CEO of the Terrell Group, our creative services agency, Natalie Inoue, who is the Vice President of our leisure marketing programs, and we have an important introduction to make to you today, so they're addressing the part. We've got board member Mike Drennan, been on our board for more than 20 years, longer than I've been here, and another board member, Jenny Nelson, who's the general manager at Inn at the Fifth. And then we've got Aubrey Nash, who is our relatively new Director of Finance and Operations, overseeing all of our accounting and systems controls. And then Janice Ross, our Vice President of Convention and Sports Marketing. We had several board members who had last week's date circled, and they're traveling and about, so they're very sorry to not be here today, but they're with us in spirit. So in your packet you have, are you set?
Well, we're waiting for somebody, the machine's not working.
Oh, okay. Well,
Sorry.
that's okay. We can go ahead and start, because I think on your iPads you have a deck that looks like this, and so we'll start, and Sally will catch up to us as the screen becomes active so that the audience can follow along. So every page of this deck has all kinds of data points plugged into it, even the table of contents page. And the key item of note on that page, which talks about our brand promise, the communities that we serve, but just sort of flags for you that we had an increase in members of 10% last year, up around 560 members now, which are important stakeholders from throughout Travel Lane County. And then as tucked into the President's message page is just a flag for you that as we get ready to host the World in 2021 with the World Outdoor Track and Field Championships, we really already host the World on an annual basis through incoming media and tour operator fans that are often sent to us through the qualified leads of Travel Oregon. We more than doubled the number of fans that we had in market this year. We hosted 40 familiarization tours for both domestic and international travel trade and media from 13 countries around the world. So Meg Trendler on our team, who's not in the room today, stays pretty busy with both journalists and tour operators coming into the county, looking to either generate earned media on the county or work us into tour itineraries where they're coming through the state of Oregon with guests on their tour packages. I think you've heard from us already that we did a relaunch, a complete redesign and relaunch of our website. It took place in the first half of the year, so we talked with you a little bit about that when we were before you at mid-year. The year-end economic results from the website were $9.6 million in economic impact. That's a number that's generated from published research. It gives us kind of an estimate that we can hang our hat on. And one of the interesting things about that estimate is it backs out all people who come into the site and leave after visiting the first page. It's called a bounce rate. But the way our site is built, we have many people coming into the site and they're really coming only to visit the page that they're landing on for a variety of reasons. It may be a specific page address that we've published in an article. It has the content that they're looking for. Maybe a microsite for a conference or meeting. But because we are using a published formula, we're probably undervaluing the economic impact of that website. So we feel pretty confident about that $9.6 million economic impact number. We had a 17.7% increase in our web traffic, and that is pretty phenomenal given that we did a complete redesign and relaunch of the site. You often will see a little lag as things start to catch up, and Sally, who's running the PowerPoint for us and oversees our integrated marketing platforms, is to be commended for getting that site up to a great start right out of the gate. And in fact, we won a state award for the site from Travel Oregon, the Outstanding Oregon Website Award, and we're really quite proud of that. Our earned media and public relations efforts went very well. We earned $3.3 million in media value. This is what it would have cost us to purchase either the broadcast airtime or the column inches, depending on whether it was print or broadcast. We had over 584 stories published, and these are stories that we were directly involved with. There were many, many more stories, much more earned media value when you look at everything that's published on Lane County. In our report, you really only see results reported out that we had something to do with. So we had an extraordinary growth in reach. We reached 487 million people around the world with the results of the earned media that we helped drive. And we talked early in the year about one of our big wins in January, which was being included in Bike Magazine's Bike Bible. an extraordinary benefit, particularly for the Cascades region of the county, both the Highway 58 and 126 corridors. And we won another award for that project, the Outstanding Oregon Public Relations Initiative Award, not only for partnering with Central Oregon to make sure that 2 areas of our county got plugged into a project that was originally only going to be about Central Oregon, but also for telling the story in the local area through local news channels so that residents became more aware of those extraordinary assets that are in the county and aware of the economic impact of cycling tourism. So we were really proud to win that award as well. I think you are becoming pretty familiar with our Adventure List campaign that the Terrell Group has designed and executed for us. This is a campaign that hits many key motivators across leisure, convention, and sports marketing. It's comprised of print ads, online digital display ads, customized landing pages, and video, each that works in tandem across multiple channels. We earned over 10 million impressions against this campaign during the program year and had more than 43,000 prospective travelers click through to those landing pages. We also won an award for this, a national award, a very prestigious award called the Communicator Award of Excellence, issued out by the Academy of Interactive and Visual Arts. So we're really, really proud. It's the first time that I can recall us winning a national award for our ad campaign. And so kudos to the Terrell Group for designing a really great, strong campaign that we continue to implement new strands in the current program year. I wanted to make sure that you're aware of the touch points that we're having across economic development channels here in Lane County. We've been working for several years with the food, culinary, and ag sector around regional brand development. There's been a new mark that's been created by K-Wood on behalf of that group called Willamette Valley Grown and Crafted. The Willamette Valley Food and Farm Coalition and the Sustainable Foods Alliance are working together on how to implement this mark across food products at all levels, from farm all the way to fork. So we're very excited about it. We have a very extensive regional page on our website that we've built out to provide support not only for member businesses in this sector, but non-member businesses as well, to just help create regional identity and focus. We've also been working pretty extensively with Lane Workforce Partnership under Christina Payne's leadership on tech sector support, and we have a brand new page on our website that's a regional introduction to the tech sector, and then we're articulating with individual communities. So you know there's been a lot of work in Eugene, downtown Eugene in particular, with fiber and a lot of different initiatives. Florence is getting ready to launch some really focused effort in this area. They're partnering with RAIN. They have a launch event coming up, and so we'll be articulating to work being done in Florence as well. As part of our focus on the tech sector, we're making assets available, photography, video, anything that we can do around regional positioning for the tech sector, which, as you know, is growing pretty dramatically. It's a very healthy economic sector, and we're also seeing some great conventions and events out of that sector. So Indie Game Con just took place this last weekend, year 2, significant growth over year 1. There's an EdTech conference coming up. There's Eugene Comic Con, and that's really been fulfilling work for our team under Janice's leadership, working with that sector to grow homegrown business that will draw people into the area every year against some of these large tech sector events. We've also continued our work with Tracktown USA, which just keeps getting bigger and bigger. This is work that you helped seed with video lottery funds as well as transient room tax support. They have a full-time staff of 20 now, 20 career professionals that are working on growing these huge events, not only here in the Eugene-Springfield area, but around the state. And we've got a really busy year ahead of us. In March, the World Indoor Championships will come to Portland. Next summer, we'll host the Olympic Track and Field Trials again here, in addition to this annual NC2A championship contract that we've been awarded through 2022. So a lot of really great things continuing to happen in that sector as well. We worked with other economic development partners to help secure the new San Jose flights that will begin on November 4th. We were the largest community contributor to the matching grant that needed to be compiled to go against the federal grant that helped secure that service. We're really excited about San Jose. It overlaps wonderfully with the work around the tech sector, and we're anticipating it's going to be a very successful route. All the data collection that the Eugene Airport has done over the last several years have really bolstered support for implementing that route, and we're very, very confident in it. We did see an increase in passenger arrivals at Eugene Airport during the program year. You've been hearing from them that their arrivals continue to grow, and so that's great news. And then you have Amtrak data here as well, both for Amtrak Cascades and Coast Starlight route. We've had some great programs that we've implemented, put in place, and have been performing very well for us. We've talked with you before about the Eugene Ale Trail. It continues to perform very well. We've recorded close to 8,000 craft brewery visits from this program, and we will continue to repulse it and keep it alive. It's working really well for the craft breweries. Not in this report, but you may have seen in our last visitor industry update, which I think you probably received very recently, we were just awarded a grant from Travel Oregon to implement a similar program around the wine industry. So all I'll tell you is that it's called Pinot Bingo, because that's been in the release. It should be a lot of fun, and the wineries are, both urban and vineyard-based wineries, are really excited about working with us on that project. And then we brought Mike the Bike. Mike the Bike is outside. We brought our Mike the Bike Adventure Advice uniforms. Mike the Bike was a grant-funded program. Travel Oregon underwrote half the costs of designing and implementing this mobile, interactive kiosk explorer, which is how we got to Mike. It's not named for Mike Drennan. He thinks it is, but it's got its own acronym, and it's been wildly successful out of the gate for us. More so than we even thought. We thought it would be innovative. We thought it would catch some eyes. It's certainly very, very popular with local audiences. It's been in parades throughout the county. It's out on the bike paths, interacting with people that don't typically come into our brick and mortar locations. But it's also been out in the field. It's been to some trade shows. Samara had it up at Portland's Sunday Streets a few weeks ago. We interacted with a lot of inbound cyclists who were planning Oak Ridge getaways, who were familiar with the Cascades region of the county, as well as our scenic bikeways. So it's been very, very ratifying for us, and a great bridge builder. Since this report was published, we've actually won 2 major awards for Mike the Bike. It's the first mobile information center of its kind in the country that we're aware of. We know there's one in BC, but they actually rent their bike. It's not branded at all. They think ours is really, really awesome. So we just won an award from DMA West, which is convention and visitors bureaus throughout the entire western United States, and from Destination Marketing International. So we actually were up against international competition and won an award in that space too. So we're very excited about it. The base bike is a holiday by Bike Friday, so it's a local bike manufacturer. And then the Mack Group and Terrell Group helped design and build out both the front box and the sidecar, which is removable, so we can use the bike with or without the sidecar. We can rebrand it for our Sports Commission. It has a Sports Commission umbrella and Sports Commission logo set that we can apply to the bike. And Natalie is going to ride this bike with some help from the rest of us, 390 miles to Pendleton for the Governor's Conference on Tourism. And we're kind of hoping we have a commissioner along for part or all of that ride. We'll stage some media stops along the way in communities and actually leverage the movement of the bike across the state, get some attention in nearby markets. So we're really, really proud of this program, and it's just out of the gate. We just launched it in April, and it's off to a great start. One of the items I handed out to you is our adventure guide. It's actually a reprint of the adventure guide, and the unique quality of it, in addition to fact checking and the kind of content revisions you would expect, is that Dairy Mart gave us a significant underwriting of this guide. They were significant financial contributors, but maybe as important, they distribute this guide in all Dairy Mart locations, in all 3 counties that they are located in. So not just here in Lane County, but in Lynn and Benton counties as well. And we have actually had AAA travel counselors in touch with us to get more information on the basis of them walking into their local Dairy Mart, seeing this guide and wanting more information in order to send us visitors through the AAA travel agencies. So really, really great program. The next slide gives you the Dean Runyon economic impact numbers. These are not generated by our office, but we're grateful recipients of them on an annual basis. Gives us a sense as to how the overall economics of the industry are going. Close to $610 million in direct visitor spending coming into the county in 2014, and almost 10,000 direct jobs in the industry. When we add up our programs, we cannot measure everything we do, but we do our very best to identify published research that you can use to give you some sense of what the return is that we're generating. We're returning $36.25 for every dollar of TRT that you're putting into us. It's always so interesting to me because it really tends to work out to be between 12 and 15% of visitor spending coming into the economy. We certainly don't bring every visitor into Lane County that comes. Some of that traffic is going to come. It's visiting friends and family. It's a traveling salesperson. It's this, it's that. But we're making a significant impact in that spending number, and certainly we wouldn't want to lose 12 to 15% of our visitor pie. So that's what we estimate on a conservative basis that we're helping drive on a per annum basis. The next slide is a little more direct and close to home. It really is the chart of your transient room tax collections. Over the last several years, we just completed the 4th record year of collections, although the growth trend is longer than 4 years. But $9.4 million in collected revenues, and then a really strong July to start the current program year. When we saw the August numbers, our throats caught a little bit because there's definitely a little bit of a decline for August, and I was concerned about that. I've been worried about reaching the peak and going down the other side, and I'm starting to, forecast that we can't have record growth forever. But I was just at a conference meeting with Smith Travel Research, and they pointed out the obvious, and that is that Labor Day this year was September 7th, and last year it was September 1st, which meant last year we had not only did we have 5 weekends in August, we had the Labor Day holiday weekend in August. And so they're assuring the industry that we're going to see those numbers start to catch up in September, although we certainly budgeted conservatively for the year ahead at 3% growth instead of this really quite rollicking growth rate that we've had over the last few years. We also incorporated the pie chart on how visitor dollars go spread throughout the economy. We know this information is useful for you and the public to see how important visitor spending is to the food and beverage sector, retail shopping, arts, entertainment, and recreation, and local transportation. We often think of hotels as the big winners in tourism. They actually get less than 20 cents of the average tourism dollar and help to feed a lot of the rest of the economy through their collection and remittance of transient room tax. And then we incorporated for the first time a little more detail on visitor volumes so that you can get a sense as to who's staying where. Of course, our mission is focused on commercial accommodations, hotels, motels, campground stays. The largest share of the market in almost every destination is private home stays, but we have pretty healthy percentages coming in through those commercial sectors as well. And so you have party size information and room night averages and things to break the market down. In our convention and sports marketing area, we booked 154,000 delegates for the future, 65,000 plus nights, 30 convention groups, 58 sports events. So you can see how important that sports commission work is to the overall booking agenda. 52 million in economic impact, that's up 11%. That's spending that either came through in-year bookings or will come into the economy based on the bookings we made during the program year we're reporting on. And then the next slide gives you a sense as to how those 130,000 visitor guides go out the door. 29,000 distributed to consumers who request a print guide from their home before they start, before they either make their travel decision, finalize it, and before they travel in. And as you'll remember, we reported out on some visitor guide research last year. 78% of those people actually bring their book with them. They hand carry that visitor guide into the market with them when they come. And then we distribute another 69,000 visitor guides in visitor centers in other places in the region to try and spur travel into Lane County, and then 32,000 into the local marketplace at hotels, our centers, and other locales. We wanted to give you a sense as to how our social media channels are doing. They're very important communication strands for us. They help us build ongoing relationships and community with prospective visitors. We continue to see these numbers go up. They're all up from these numbers, which were as of June 30th. But we have social media channels against all target markets: leisure, convention, and sports. And then we have blogs as well, and those interact with our website. You can get to these channels from our website, and we continue healthy conversations. We remain the fall foliage blog for the entire state. We generate a great deal of traffic to our blog and channels through that work. And then our visitor center contacts, close to 20,000 in the program year. You can see a breakdown between the Adventure Center, downtown Eugene, our visitor van, and general information calls. And Mike the Bike would be tucked into that visitor van. Mike the Bike, by the way, has a power assist and will be outfitted with a generator, so we can use an iPad and actually print out maps. If somebody has a kind of a customized question and we need to print out a document for them, we're able to do it right on the fly. Our Adventure Center completed 5 years during the program year, so we took a look back at how it had been performing, generating $3 for every dollar that we invest into it out of the Travel Lane County budget. It saw a 20% increase in walk-in traffic, although we really want to grow that number. It's such a beautiful introduction to Lane County, and everyone who walks in that door is inspired. We want to get more people in the door. We sell all of the parking passes and permits that you might need to access public lands, whether it's your county parks or it's Forest Service lands. We saw a 77% increase in those passes and permit sales. And then, as you know, we're a Tickets West outlet there as well. And the Adventure Center is the main home of our Kids Adventure Club, which is a local mailing list of thousands of families who get our family-oriented events calendar every month and then interact with us at these quarterly kids-oriented events. Incorporated into the report is some information on Travel Lane County itself, the amount of transient room tax that came to us through the 2.1 points of distribution that we received, the other private dollars that we brought in through retail, ad sales, and sponsorships, our membership dues, and then in-kind contributions. And then we gave you a sense as to the program areas that comprise our program budget. So our board receives and you actually through our board packets receive a functional line item financial profit and loss from us every month. We also allocate those functional expenses against our target markets so that we can see what we're allocating against each target, our centralized platforms, our membership and community relations and admin. And then the last couple of slides is just a roundup of our staff and our board. The only real addendum to the report, I have two quick updates for you. One, we have a meeting planner guide that is an electronic digital guide that's out being processed for digital publishing. We're really excited about it. It'll be live, and you'll see an email come in from me with a link to that when it's live on our website. And then I wanted to just make a brief note about the infrastructure, the facilities committee that the board has formed to kind of look at local sports facilities and convention and meeting space. It's been meeting for a few months. We are actually co-funding with the City of Eugene and Willamette Lane some feasibility work on sports facilities, looking at all the things that are currently being planned, everything from Civic Park and the YMCA facilities to what potential lies out there as future investments are made and how we might planned sporting facilities that both serve local residents and become an economic development tool. So we're really excited about that work. That RFP is just headed out the door, and we're hoping to have the work done within a 90-day window. And then we've also been talking about 2021 as a catalyst for facility development, specifically around meeting space, kind of looking at what potential there is in downtown Eugene and in Springfield, meeting with those cities, looking at different tools and land that's available. And I just really wanted to flag that conversation for you. I'm sure if either city gets excited about moving forward with infrastructure development, they're going to be circling around to talk to you guys about it. So I didn't want you to be taken by surprise or not be really quite aware that we are engaging in those conversations. We continue to recognize that we're underbuilt for meeting space in the metro area and looking for ways to solve that problem. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions that any of you might have for me.
Well, first, I'd just like to point out that another one of your board members snuck in the back while you were speaking, Springfield Mayor Christine Lundberg. Welcome, Mayor. And I also want to offer our administrator as a possible cyclist. As it takes.
Absolutely.
It's only 390 miles.
Do I get the moped thing?
Short, John. The power assist?
Power assist.
Don't let him sandbag you. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Carrie. Great presentation. You could go on for hours and not bore us, really.
Well, that's very kind of you. I might have seen a slight yawn or two up there, but you guys are pretty attentive.
You know, I'm looking, by the way, I told my sister, Lorna Davis, who does a job similar to yours. She's a Chamber of Commerce in Greater Newport area, but also travel. And I told her that you were presenting today, and she wished she could be here. But she did say, please say hello to Carrie.
Oh, that's very kind. She does a fabulous job there.
You know, I just wanted to say that I'm on on our website right now, and I'm looking at the top adventures, things that you don't even talk about in this presentation. We have a great place for people to visit. I've heard from people, including my sister, who travels around the world literally to bring people to Oregon, that Lane County is one of the three major destinations in the state of Oregon, is what I've heard, with the Columbia Gorge in Portland and the Oregon coast and Lane County, specifically right here.
Awesome.
It's because of y'all, you know, because we've made the investment in you through the years. We continue to make the investment and the return on the investment, and I'll look at Mike Brennan, the expert on return on investment, has been great and continues to be great. And it's good to see Mike, the board member, in here, and Mike, the bike, outside. I thought they were the same person for a long time, but I'm looking at your website, and I'm seeing the top adventures. And who wouldn't come to Lane County for dune buggy thrills on the Oregon dunes? Look for BART in Springfield. Tour the bridges of Lane County. Embark on a geo tour. Willamette Valley wine tasting. Follow the Eugene Ale Trail. Paddle the Mackenzie River. Mike,
It's pretty fabulous.
Yeah,
We're all lucky.
You have a great product to market. I'd just like to say, you know, just a few words. Good job doing it. Good job to the board. I see many of the board members here. You've attracted a great board of really professional and invigorated people. And I love being the liaison from the county to the board. I just sit there in awe listening to people and listening to the presentations that you make. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I won't say any more. Once again, the only last thing I'll say is I'll reiterate, you could talk for hours, and I personally would not be bored. You have plenty to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stewart.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Carrie, thank you. I really appreciate the presentation today. You know, I like pictures, and you've included some incredible pictures.
I know there's one in there you really like.
Yeah, I didn't want to brag, but I appreciate that being in there. That was a great evening. But, you know, the numbers and everything just speak for themselves. I mean, it's nice to be headed in the right direction. There's a lot of positive, great things taking place. I appreciate, too, is it Pinot Bingo? Is that what you called it? A few years ago, my wife and I took her parents down to Douglas County and stayed, and we got involved in their kind of tours similar to our museums where you can get stamps and you do that. And I always kind of wondered, why don't we do that here? I mean, our wineries just kind of separate, doing their own thing, and so I'm really appreciative that that you're bringing that, a similar type of a thing, to encourage people to get out and tour the wineries and get out in the countryside. So that's
I think that was a Sally brainstorm.
So that's really neat. But I can't say enough. Great work, and I really appreciate all that you're doing to promote this excellent place we live.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say, number one, thank you so much, not only to you and the staff and the board for all the great work, but my main comment today is to reiterate a portion of what Commissioner Stewart just mentioned, and that is that we get a lot of presentations here, and people tell us that they're doing good things, and we generally agree that they are doing good things. But the thing you've done, I think it's a model for other presenters and government, non-government organizations, business presenters, is you provided numbers. And these numbers are easier to understand. You put them in context. And I think that for decision makers that are having to allocate money and allocate time, that you've done a really good job in trying to figure out how to quantify something that you could have easily said, oh, it's a beautiful community and lots of people are coming. But there's a lot more to it, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Carrie, so it's toward the end of August, first part of September, Debbie and I were actually in Sonoma and Napa Valley. And that was our wedding anniversary, and so we took a week down there. And when we hit many of the wineries, I was actually somewhat surprised that when we visited with them, first of all, I know we have some great wineries here, but we are single A minor leagues, and I mean, it's pretty significant on how many are there and how much business is there. But the one thing I was really pleased to hear is how many wineries in Sonoma and Napa Valley actually were quite aware of Oregon's Pinots. And so on that piece, here recently we're discussing the STIP process for the Area Commission on Transportation, and territorial is being mentioned again as part of that. I guess maybe your perspective, your opinion, do you view maybe the improvements, if there's road improvements being made, do you view that as potentially being a more of a positive catalyst for the wineries, especially that are along territorial, or I will admit, when you're traveling from Williams to Sonoma, that's a pretty curvy road. And there are trucks on that road too, pretty scary to be honest with you. But I don't know, maybe just your general thoughts on that. And because I know this is something that we've been, in your organization in particular, has been pushing, and it would be great just to continue to have those types of businesses out in the forefront. I think the state of Washington is doing pretty well with putting their wineries out in the forefront. Of course, California doesn't need to, I don't think, anymore, so it's pretty mature. But maybe just your general thoughts on that.
Well, I do serve on the Stakeholder Advisory Committee for the STIP, not for the STIP necessarily, but for transplant,
right.
the revisions of transplant. So we certainly have had some conversations around territorial, and we have written letters of support for grants coming out of the county to work on the most dangerous sections of territorial in wine country. And I think there are several key things to keep in mind about territorial. We've proposed it as a scenic bikeway a few times, but because of the lack of shoulder and the nature of the road and the kind of traffic on it, the State Scenic Bikeways Committee just really can't bring themselves to give it a designation because of safety factors, as beautiful as it is, and as many individual cyclists that go there. So any improvement to that corridor will not only help position our wine country that's along territorial, but it gives us an opportunity for some cycling tourism as well, because it is a very scenic route. I live out in that area. I drive that road as an alternative when I'm going south safety improvements. And the other key to keep in mind, to be fair to everybody around Territorial, is that you still have agricultural businesses using that corridor. They're moving farm equipment, and one of the big things that happens throughout Oregon is the conflict between those in agricultural businesses that are not wineries and those that are, because they have limited corridors where they can move very slow-moving large equipment. We also have logging truck traffic along Territorial. So tourism aside, that road needs some attention and some improvements, because you have a lot of different important users using it regularly. Without a doubt, any improvements made to that corridor will be helpful from a tourism perspective. And while I agree with you that we don't have the density of wineries here, our wines are fabulous. And for us, the lack of density is the most precious and important thing that we have to offer. When you go to the North Valley and you're looking at literally dozens of blue signs pointing to wineries in every direction. I mean, for me, I shut down. I don't even go. I can't decide where to go. It's too dense. It's too congested. And so we love that we're not as dense as a Sonoma or as dense as the North Valley, and putting together a quality product and a really high quality experience. And road improvements to Territorial would certainly enhance that.
Well, I know one of the parts on that process is we're actually working on hopefully eventually having a jurisdictional transfer, because Territorial right now is a state system, and the jurisdictional transfer, so it's under a county ownership. You know, when that's going to happen, I don't know, but at least that's the goal. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a couple items I'd like to kind of cover. First, I'd just like to make note that definitely you must be doing good work, because we're building new hotels left and right in Lane County. It seems like every time I turn around, there's a new hotel breaking ground of some kind. So something must be going right, because there's enough demand that the market's building, more supply. So it definitely shows a lot of good work, and I think the numbers show that, as Commissioner Sorensen pointed out. Have you noticed this summer any impact to the continual news stories about the Western fire season on tourism at all, and the issues where we were having smoke in the valley and all that? Has that been an issue for travel promotion?
I cannot say that I have any evidence that it has depressed visitation. I don't know if Jenny had any Jenny's gone. I have not heard that we've had any cancellations. Certainly, we put together the Create Eugene plein air paint out. It took place on a really smoky day. It was clear in the morning. The smoke came in the afternoon. Everybody participating in that event certainly was impacted by the smoke. But I don't know that it's had a depressing effect at this point on tourism. If the West has been in it together. And I would want to say you do such a great job as a commission of bringing up points that I don't talk about in my report, and hotel room development is one of them. 560 rooms announced. Those rooms, that's going to increase our product plant by 18%, and it's going to have a significant impact and makes the topic of meeting space, an indoor track, any additional demand generators, all the more important, because we have these big spikes, we have compression, we fill completely at certain times around the big track meets, around U of O graduation, around home football games, but there are a lot of days of the year when we are not full. And those 560 rooms are all limited service or extended stay investments. We welcome them. They'll be great rooms, but they are going to, in all likelihood, just soak up some of the demand that exists here without creating more demand. In some cases, they'll help us keep some money here that we're not, and not leak it up the highway corridor, and we really like that. But we really need to be strategic about our community as a destination and how we invest to drive visitor demand into the future. So I don't have a good answer for you on the fire situation and the smoke, and I appreciate the opportunity to respond to the hotel room investment.
Well, I appreciate your answer, which is going to have me touch on a third rail here. Is there been any issues with the online booking services and the ability to collect TRT, specifically like Airbnb? I've heard some concerns that we're booking a lot of in-house rooms or people, sort of operating bed and breakfasts under the radar, and we're not getting our transient room tax collections, and there's some other issues there. Can you speak to that? Is that something that needs to be addressed at the state level through the legislature, or is that something, I don't know what we can do as a board. We don't really have an enforcement capability in the county structure, so can you talk to that a little bit?
We could talk for a long time about this topic. It's a huge topic. It's so interesting. I was just looking at national and statewide statistics around the hotel industry and how many hotel rooms are in the pipeline overall. So just as an aside, Portland metro area has 2,500 rooms coming online. So the 500 that we have announced, that just gives you some perspective. And when I was listening to this presentation, I thought, and what would be in the pipeline if Airbnb and VRBO and those other kinds of rentals did not exist? Because they have huge market share. In some instances, they're commanding a quarter of the market, depending on the density of those kinds of offerings in different locations around the country, and that's not even speaking to what's happening around the world. And in many cases, they are not a participant who offers a house or a room is not required by the platform to collect and remit TRT. I think the platforms are trying tacitly to do a little better job of flagging for individual proprietors the fact that they really need to be checking on their local regulations. There's no requirement that they do that. And when you look at the local codes, and you may want to have a huddle with the cities in terms of their ordinances too. You have 4 cities that have local ordinances: Eugene, Springfield, Cottage Grove, and Florence. But I'm not so sure that the code requires someone with 2 rooms or less to collect and remit TRT, even if they're selling those 2 rooms every day, 365 days a year. And every jurisdiction's language is a little bit different, but I would say that you should take a little look. What does your code actually say? Who is required to collect and remit? And if they're on an ongoing commercial venture, they need to be meeting health and safety regulations. They need to have smoke detectors. And, that's another huge concern. Just the basic health and safety that most consumers don't think about because you think about it for them. And then, are they subject? Because I'm not sure that they all are the way the current ordinances and codes are written. We do have a solution at the state level, but there's no enforcement. So the state did pass some language around this topic, but there's no enforcement there at all. And how your local codes are written is what counts for your local TRT collections. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So what'll be interesting is as we look at the codes and stuff like that, there's still the enforcement side. So I'm trying to think of where we would fund somebody to do that enforcement as we actually contract with another agency to do our our collections. So we don't.
And I think they are working on this topic too, Commissioner. I'm not sure if there's been discussion at the staff level or not, but I know that they have a long list of TRT issues within the city of Eugene that they're actively working on. I'm not privy to what all of them are, but I know this is on their radar. They're concerned about it too. And the interesting thing for me over the last couple of years, as this has really started to grow and proliferate, is I'll get calls from somebody who owns a B&B or they own a vacation rental on one of these platforms and they are complying with the regulatory environment, and they're incensed that others are not, because it places them at an unfair, it's unfair. And the reality is we're creating destination demand. So we're helping create the demand for people wanting to rent these homes and rooms and these kinds of things, and they're really not participating to the same degree that hotels, motels, and campgrounds are.
I agree, and it is, like the Edwin K. and a few others have contacted me that own legitimate businesses that pay their TRT, and they're the ones that, their kitchens are inspected for, and they're certified. They have the smoke detectors, they have all the correct exit and meet all the codes, and then there's somebody that's renting a room in their house that may not, and they're not paying any TRT because they're using Airbnb or VRBO, and it's an issue that I think we all need to deal with. It's the wave of the future, whether it's this or whether it's Uber for the taxi industry or some other platforms. People are starting to do it yourself, vacation planning, and then it kind of becomes buyer beware somewhat on what you're going to get on the other end of that. But I do think we need to make it a fair system where everybody is at least paying their share of the transient room tax, which generates the demand that fills their room in their house, whatever or rents their house for them. So I think that requires a lot longer discussion than we probably have here today, but maybe it's something the board might want to tag for a future agenda item to take a look at least our code to see whether we've got the right language in there to require some of these folks to at least be paying TRT, even if they only do a single room. Or maybe there's some minimum number of nights a year or something we can hit that requires them to go and start paying TRT. Commissioner Farr.
Two last things real quickly, and we're behind on time, I understand. Your website's great. Our website's great. I'm looking right now. You know what's happening on Saturday here in town, and I would not know about it if not for the website. Bats and Creepy Creatures is on Saturday.
I think I might know an owl or something that might be out on the trail with the bats and creepy creatures.
So, no, it's pretty astounding what you have. But the thing I wanted to mention is something that you touched on just a little bit, and you're going to touch on it a lot more as we get closer. But 2021, we have a huge opportunity. Where a lot of people are going to be coming from all over the world to our county and to this part of the state. And, I'd like to say that it would have been more difficult for that to happen, for us to attract those games, if not for the work that's been done by Travel Lane County and Eugene Cascades and Coast to make this an attractive place to visit. But we have an opportunity to get people here for the first time and then bring them back over and over again. And we've been talking about it with Lane County Parks, among other things, is that we can enhance our infrastructure in preparation for 2021 in a way that's going to last for many generations to come, or many decades to come. And so as we move forward, getting closer to 2021, I know your eye is on the ball, and everybody's eye should be even more closely on the ball. What can we do to make this a more attractive place to be once people are here, to get them to come back, and to also build infrastructure that's going to remain after the 2021 games are over?
Well, we did flag the fairgrounds complex in the sports facility RFP just to see if there are any learnings from that as the fairgrounds gets ready to undertake its own master plan. So Corey Buller's in the loop on that, and the Public Works folks. The conversations that I've had with representatives from the two cities is they see this very much as you do. I think that people are starting to think about united front topics that might be of mutual benefit to the two cities, the county, and the other partners that go on the united front trip each year, and also just a keen sense of stewardship and awareness that you want to identify projects that do really serve the community long term, that don't represent overbuilding, or that really kind of keep our eye on the ball in terms of the kinds of assets that get added to the product plant that are right for the respective cities and the county. And so I do think that people are having just those kinds of conversations. We hope, and it's a very short timeline, we hope that there can be some additional meeting space that helps us capture more of the gathering business that's associated with 2020 and not lose it all up the highway, because there are a variety of meetings that need to take place around that event, and the current facilities that we have will be largely deployed around team athlete focused functions. Whether we can do it or not, I don't know. 5 years is not very long at all when you don't have land assembled, identified, zoned, and ready to go. But I think people are really trying to take a look at that. You've got some parcels that are very close to the Eugene Conference Center that are in public ownership that you may well be approached about whether or not there's some possible configurations. In my way of thinking, if we're going to add significant meeting space, we should do it as close to existing meeting space in hotel rooms as possible, so that we can kind of rise the tide and not have things competing against each other that are spread out throughout the metro area. But those conversations will come to you kind of defined in a way that you can respond to them and not quite as vague and nebulous as what I'm doing right now. But there are some opportunities, I think. And there's been some discussion around housing issues and whether investments might be made that are where you have maybe an affordable housing complex that gets used for 2021, it gets converted to affordable housing after, those kinds of conversations where you can really find some win-wins that serve the community long-term in areas of high need.
I'm glad you mentioned that last. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lyken?
One last thing. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I remember my first term as mayor when Jim Torrey was mayor. I remember those San Jose conversations happening then. Unfortunately, San Jose couldn't see a connection back in those days, and so I just want to say thank you very much. I hope folks understand that this may be one of those opportunities, and really big thank you to you, Carrie, and your staff on this. You know, this, first of all, it signals on how the computer gaming industry is really beginning to take off here in Eugene. We can't really compete with the console game. There's this little company in Redmond, Washington, I think has a pretty strong piece of the market on that. But I think it really sends a positive signal, because that connection, folks understand, that connection may end up being one of the best things that you and your staff have done in quite some time. And
well, the Eugene Airport gets the primary credit. We just gave a little financial lift.
I get that, but I think that's a great teamwork on that. And first of all, you have all of that capital investment down there, and the only reason why that's happening is because they actually see, there's opportunity here too. I mean, that's a give and take. So big thank you. And I agree, the Eugene Airport's you've done the yeoman's job, but
Yep.
They needed a good partner too. So
Well,
really
we're proud to
appreciate
be
that.
able to participate and help. We think it's a win-win all the way. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. So moving on, we'll move on to item 7C, which is discussion expenditure of TRT funds for visitor marketing. And I think we have Mr. Mokrajewski and Mr. Cheney. So Steve, if you want to kick it off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioners, I'll just make a few introductory comments here, and then Jim is going to walk you through the memo that's been posted online and made available to the board and the public that sort of outlines the current structure and then potential options going forward. But I want to just set the context for you that, as the board knows, the last process that the county went through that resulted in the current contract with Travel Lane County was in 2013. There was a request for proposals process, and it resulted in, I believe, a 3-year contract that went from 2013 and expires July 1st of 2013, expires July 1st of 2016. So that contract is coming up, and we've had a number of communications with Travel Lane County. We received a letter from Ms. Westland and the board in June of this year requesting that Lane County consider a longer-term contract, and the concept was a rolling contract with an annual review and renewal that would allow for continued emphasis on multi-year strategic planning and program implementation. That was the request of Travel Lane County. We had a number of meetings with Ms. Westland and discussions with the Travel Lane County board, trying to understand exactly what the desire was on their end. And I will say that our desire is to have, and I think there's mutual interest here between Travel Lane County and Lane County, to have a well-designed, a well-thought-out, and a well-understood process by everyone involved. And our goal at the staff level here is to particularly try to have a focus on collaboration, recognizing that we have a partnership that exists. It's existed for a long time between these organizations, and so that can be the starting point for our discussions. So overall, we're hoping our objective that we'd like to achieve is to strike a balance between our interests in maintaining accountability and transparency for the taxpayers, as well as our interest in providing flexibility and allowing for investment of for the agency that provides those services and that carries out that work. So that's really the balance that we're trying to strike here, is to make sure that we have, and we believe that we can do that, and we have some options that we'll lay out for you to make sure that we maintain that balance between accountability and transparency and the flexibility that is being in the investment that's being requested by Travel Lane County. So Jim will walk through the current structure and then the options that are available going forward. We're not asking for the board to necessarily take action and make a final commitment today, but we are asking that you point us in a direction so that we can do additional work with Travel Lane County, and really to lay out a process going forward that will come back to the board likely several times before a final decision is made in advance of the current contract expiring.
Thank you. Chair Bozovich, Commissioners. Briefly, and I think I can be brief here, I'm referring to the memorandum that you received. As you know, you set aside, the commissioners in the past have set aside 70% of the TRT revenues for visitor marketing. And the purpose of this memorandum is to summarize what your options are, and what your options are in particular in response to what has been the discussions with Travel Lane County. And the first thing is the board has discretion in how to allocate this money. Now, historically, this has been done with a contract process. There's been a request for qualifications, but it resulted in a contract. And until 2013, there wasn't any competition for that. Now, as I said, this has been typically done by contract, where we enter into an agreement where they provide us with insurance and essentially act as the county's agents in operating the tourism marketing. But frankly, the relationship that we've had in the past is more close to a grant-type relationship than a contract relationship. Generally, you can look at, when you have discretion, that there are two ways, if you have some money to allocate toward a purpose, either a contract or a grant. In a contract, typically you'd define the specific results you're looking for and go out with a competitive procurement where you measure the people who propose against what the results are you're looking for. Conversely, under a grant, what you would do is look for individuals or groups that were providing services that you wanted to support. And in that case, you'd request qualifications or action plans from various groups, and then allocate all the money to one group, or however, the same as you would with a contract. The difference is that with a grant, you retain discretion, because the commissioners can award the money. That's not a competitive process, and can use your judgment in how to allocate the funds. One of the distinctions between the two, though, to bear in mind, is that in a contract process where you have competition, relates to discharging fiduciary responsibility. In a contract, you're saying what you want to have done, and you're getting competitive proposals, and by evaluating those according to the criteria, you've resolved your fiduciary responsibility for the expenditure of the funds. Under a grant, typically there are controls in terms of feedback, usually periodic, limited, they're called audits, but they're not audits necessarily, where the program is reviewed by an independent third party at a fairly low expense to see are the funds being expended in an effective way toward the goals that you're supporting. So historically, the way the relationship has actually played out between the county and Travel Lane County and its predecessors, this has been more like a grant than it has been like a contract. And so one of the things you'll find in this memo is you'll find that that's a threshold decision of whether the commissioners would like to make this a competitive process, or whether the commissioners are comfortable using your discretion to make the decision on how these funds are to be made. Because if it's the discretion of the commissioners to support the activities, then a grant, I think, is a better vehicle to do so. There's some other analysis in the memo describing this, but I think what I'll do at this point, if there aren't any questions at this point, is just jump ahead to page 4 of that memo. On page 4, I think I've summarized as the county administrator has done, the discussion and where we are in the discussion about what the alternatives might be with contract or grant for Travel Lane County, and if the commissioners do wish to go ahead with a grant process, about some steps that you might want to go through. You'll see basically Travel Lane County, it appears they're comfortable with the idea of a grant process, but they've requested that it be an RFQ process, and again, which would be entirely appropriate for that. They're requesting a formal requirement that the board only allocates the entire amount, that 2.1%, to a single party. That with respect to a performance audit or evaluation of the program periodically, the criteria be established by a committee, and the grant be for as long as possible. Below that, in the 4 points which respond to the same 4 points above, I think I've laid out your options. If you're comfortable using your discretion, then an RFQ and grant process is appropriate. Whether the board wants to make a commitment to make a single allocation or multiple is entirely your discretion. Regarding audit evaluation, generally, it's the grantor that establishes the criteria, that has the final say on what the criteria are that are going to be measured. In this case, the commissioners have determined that the purpose of this fund is for tourism marketing, and so the establishment of a limited number of performance criteria ultimately probably is more commonly is a staff decision on the part of the grantor rather than a committee of the grantor and the grantee. And for a duration, and duration has been a significant issue, and I can understand this, where we've had contracts and then they expire. Right now there's 9 months left until this contract expires. That does make it hard for planning. What Mr. Mokrahysky proposed, as discussed in the letter, is that we would go with a grant period of 3 years, but rather than letting that grant period run out or nearly run out before going on, would be a periodic review every other year of the performance review, with the opportunity each year to add another year onto the end of the grant. By doing so, this is much like that rolling contract concept, then there would always be at least 2 years and as much as 3 years available out ahead that was available to the grantee, whoever it is, probably Travel Lane County or whoever else the commissioners chose, would be able to rely on going ahead within the limitations of a future board making some other decision. I think that summarizes it, what we have here, and I would welcome any questions or discussion.
Questions for staff? Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the information. I guess what I'm trying to figure out, though, is so who got together and to have this conversation about why this is before the board? Did you just want to discuss about the fact that we want to maybe put forth a rolling, I heard you say a rollover, so I'm assuming this is kind of like a Coach K contract with Duke, rolling over every period, to make sure that he is in place. So I'm just trying to get my arms around this of why is this coming before the board for discussion? And are you just trying to get at, are you interested in having just this constant rollover with Travel Lane County, or help me out here, because when I saw this on the agenda, I'll be honest with you, I was a little surprised, but so maybe if you can help me out, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Lyken, the impetus for this was a letter that we received from Travel Lane County in June of this year, and they specifically requested that we consider, and their request was for Lane County to consider a 5-year rolling contract with an annual review and renewal. So we had conversations in response to that to first evaluate, is that something that's possible? And we engaged in a few conversations with Travel County officials to make sure we understand where they were going. We then got to the point where we are right now, where we have some options available for the board. We feel like we've rounded this out, and we have the ability to present information to you. We wanted to do this in far enough advance of the contract expiring that we actually have the time to go through that process and make sure that it's, again, well thought out, well defined, and well understood by everyone that's involved. The board, agencies that would apply for a grant or a contract, and the public. So that's why it's before you today. In terms of the 5-year, so the request from Traveling County was a 5-year rolling contract. I don't know that it was mentioned, but the issue with the duration of an agreement, a grant or a contract beyond 3 years for the size of this contract is difficult because of the term of a commissioner, that you have 4-year terms for commissioners. So the concern is that you do anything of 4 to 5 years, you're going to have the potential to bind a future board and not allow them to reconsider any of those decisions. So that's why we put before you options. You certainly don't, we're looking for sort of review and discussion about these options, whether or not you like to continue to do a contract process, an RFP or RFQ that results in a contract, or do an RFQ that results in a grant. And again, we're suggesting that regardless of the process you set up, let's have this annual review so that you can demonstrate that the performance is being met.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I just, Mr. Chair, real quick follow-up.
Sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The other question I would have is, thank you, Jim, for presenting. I'm guessing that seeing Jim and seeing Steve here, that between one or two of you, you're going to have more of a, I guess it's going to be your fingerprints on as far as the from the staff level working with Travel Lane County, because I will tell you the last time we went through this exercise was not well thought out, not well defined, and put Ms. Moody in what I would call a pretty challenging position where she didn't need to be. And so I just wanted to make sure that from a staff level that we do have somebody from legal, which I very much appreciate it. Steve, I don't know how much interaction you're going to have on this, or if you plan on, having somebody else sit at the table on this, but I think it would be very helpful that if we knew, in a sense, from staff perspective, who was going to be, in a sense, representing the county through these conversations before they ultimately come back before the board or whatever decision we'll be making today.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Legan. I appreciate you bringing that up, and it's certainly our desire. I wasn't here for the last cycle, so I didn't get to experience that directly, but I certainly have heard from a number of folks, both inside our organization and outside our organization, about the concerns that resulted from that process. So we want to try to avoid the challenges there, but still, make sure we have again, this balance between accountability and transparency, and the allowing for the investment and the long-term planning that the agency would like to have the ability to do. In terms of who's going to be at the table, we will have legal representation, and I'm going to continue to sit at the table to make sure that it goes the way that the board would like it to go once we determine that path. So we'll bring other resources from our side. I think we've had good communication. You certainly can ask the folks from Travel Lane County how they feel about that to date, but it's our goal to make sure that we have good communication, understanding throughout this process going forward.
Thank you.
If I may add one thing I think that one of the reasons why this process is good to have it before you is that the process wasn't clearly recorded before. A lot of what transpired when the TRT was adopted, most of those people aren't at the table anymore. So a lot of things that have happened are the assumptions about how this process is going to work, but those assumptions don't necessarily get passed down. And so one thing that I think is a really good outcome, if we define that every periodically we'll go out with this. If we go out, we're going to do it in a grant. We're going to allocate or not allocate it all to one party, and we record that, then everybody will know what the rules are, and we won't wind up with misunderstandings. And I think that's a really critical part of doing so as time goes on, because if this works, and it's going to work, then it'll be 10 years from now, perhaps, when somebody will want to reconsider this, and again, maybe none of us are there, and we're all relying on our own, those people are relying on their assumptions about how the process is going to work. So I think by capturing this and putting it in a way that works for the people who do tourism marketing and works for the board, I think going forward, it'll be a much more positive and much more focused process.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, this is a win-win situation all around. When I first saw the June 2nd letter, asking for a 5-year rolling contract, I thought that makes a great deal of sense, because Travel Lane County is a business, and they have their own contracts to uphold, and some of those contracts go out a great distance. Let's take a look at 2021. That's 5 years from now. You know, so the kinds of contracts that the board administers and the staff brings to the board really go beyond the tenuous situation that we saw 2 years ago, in August 2 years ago. I'm looking at a picture right now that was taken from over there during that meeting, and I don't want that meeting again. That was not good for anybody who was involved. And Mr. Mokrahajski, you can thank goodness that you weren't there, because it wasn't a pretty sight, although it was pretty in light of the fact that everybody came out in your support, because everybody saw the value. Everybody saw the return on the investment, once again, that we have been getting. And what we're doing with this, the compromise that you've reached between the 5-year and the 3-year, between a 5-year rolling contract and a grant, is one that really is tenable on all sides. The board can live with it, because they're not going to get the plug pulled 2 months from now at any one point in time. And Travel Lane County, Eugene, Cascades, and Coast wants the scrutiny, absolutely wants the scrutiny, because when we scrutinize what they're doing, we're pretty happy with what we see. And by doing that on a regular basis and extending the grant on a regular basis, everybody is years and years out happy at all times. So I view this as a real masterpiece of work between you, Mr. Cheney, and Mr. Mokrahajski, and between Kerry and the board to get this to this point in time. What I'm pleased about it is that when Kerry and the organization are looking at longer-term enticements to bring people in, the people that they're enticing don't have to worry about, are we still going to be dealing with the same people when it happens? You know, it's not even going to be an issue. So I view this really as being a win-win-win situation for everybody. And we as a board, we or a future board can say, I'm sorry, you guys, you're out of here. You're not doing what you said. And that can happen. You know, that's absolutely on the table. We're not forsaking the public trust by saying you have this forever. And once again, I really want to underline that Travel Lane County wants the scrutiny. And every time I've personally scrutinized what they're doing, it's looked pretty darn good to me. I'm looking at Mike the Bike out there. There's nothing like that anywhere. You know, the things that we're doing are innovative. We don't need somebody from Memphis to come in and tell us how to do it. We don't need somebody from the East Coast to bring their glossy publications to show us how to do it. We're doing it right here. And we're doing it in a very highly tailored fashion that works very well for our community and for our organization, and to bring people to our community, to bring people to Lane County. So that's my 2 cents worth on it. It's just a win-win, and I really like to. There are 3 people in this room who work really hard on it. I got to sit in the sidelines and watch it happen. And but we saw the first letter on June 2nd. I think we had a meeting, the 3 of us with Kerry, on just a few days after that, maybe as early as June 6th or 7th, something like that. It may have been a little bit later than that. But that's when you began to explore, when, Mr. Cheney, you brought forward the concept of a grant rather than a contract, which, looking at what doesn't have to happen with a grant. You know, it's the pages and pages of documentation and various things that have to be demonstrated in a contract that don't have to be demonstrated in a grant. So it's easier to administer, it's easier to live with, and it's easier to predict what's going to be happening in the future. So thanks everybody who worked on this. Once again, I got to sit on the sidelines and say, wow, I'm glad I got to hear that. So thank you very much.
Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to say thank you, Mr. Cheney, for the hard work. I've found myself questioning at times why we're having this conversation, and the reason we're having this conversation is because we have state law that we have to follow, and that's the bottom line. As I think back on the research that I've done as far as intent, I mean, at one time Lane County went out to get in the TRT business, and the cities were already in it, and for their blessing for us to be able to get in the TRT business. We took on the responsibility to, our share of TRT was to 2.1, or Carrie can tell me again, it should be branded on my head, but whatever that percentage is that we agreed upon. 2.1 is to be dedicated to pay for increasing overnight stays. And so, to me, a long time ago, it was agreed upon. We put together a body. I mean, it was agreed upon body. We have Springfield representatives, we have Eugene, we have the county, and we have private sector, our partners in the private sector. So it's a board that runs it. And so, you know, I think we have an agreement to transfer that money over to that body. If we're not happy with the way that body's operating, or we think there's other opportunities, we have a representative, which I've never had the opportunity to be on the board, and maybe at some point I might do a stint on their board. But Commissioner Farr does a great job, and others have in the past. And you know, if we have concerns, those are represented to the board, and that their board makes, you know, takes that in advisement and does what they need to do. So that being said, I wish there was a different vehicle that could be used to satisfy state law, but being we're bound to follow it, I appreciate, Jim, you finding a way for us to do that in this manner. I'm supportive of the grant process, and you know, I might support it if there's reason to. I might support a little bit longer, but 3 years rolling, I guess, is maybe no different than 5 years rolling. It's just, we're going to do our due diligence. We're going to make sure that, you know, we check into the organization and they're doing with the money that they're supposed to do. What'd you say, every other year, right?
Pardon?
Every other year, I think we're going to do that, to check in with the audit check. So I'm comfortable with what you proposed here and supportive. So thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Good lawyering.
And I have to agree, and I, you know, want to echo a little bit of what Commissioner Storch said. You know, we're here because we're allocating, you know, millions of dollars in taxes, and folks pay those taxes to us. And under Oregon law, we have a responsibility to allocate those under certain conditions. And unless we're internally allocating it in our budget to a county department, there's very strict, you know, state law around what you do with that when you allocate it outside of government. And even though we're part of and responsible for the formation of CVALCO, you know, and then ultimately Travel Lane, it is a separate organization. And even though we have a voting member on its board, you know, we don't have controlling interest in it. It's not a department of Lane County. The employees in it are not Lane County employees. Therefore, it has to be treated as allocating money outside of Lane County. Just as we do with our economic development grants to RAIN, you know, we did it as a grant. We didn't write a contract to RAIN because we're not asking for them to perform a specific service. We might write a contract with Wildish to overlay a certain road, you know, because we are asking for a specific set of services and outcomes easily measured, and then they're doing work for Lane County under a contract from our road fund. This is a lot different, and we do a lot of granting to various agencies, whether it's economic development money, whether it's money that comes out of you know, other places. You know, we even have some small grants we run for rural tourism directly from the board. They're not contracts, they're grants. So I really see the power in changing this over to a grant process. It does allow us a lot more discretion than a contract process. If we're contracting for that overlay of that road, we have a specific set of criteria they're supposed to supply, performance criteria, how, you know, grade of the pavement, compaction of the pavement, all that stuff. If you're a contractor that's certified, insured, and everything else, and you bid on that, we only have the choice of awarding it to the lowest bidder, you know, as long as they meet the qualifications. We have no discretion. In a grant situation, when you've seen us award grants for various things, we had discretion. We could have chosen not to give Rain that $50,000 2-year grant. We could have chosen not to give Folio Trucking the $40,000 last week. When we do the grants for the small grants for tourism, whether we do it to the Chainsaw Festival upriver or we do it, for some other thing, it's very discretionary on the part of the board, and we have a lot of discretion in that case. And I think the grant solution is a great solution. Doing it with a rolling, re-up, where we can add a year, before we get, before we get to the 2 years out, I think is a great idea because it allows them the consistency of planning, because a lot of the work they do is on longer than a 1-year contract. And it also gets us around the issue of binding future boards, which is something we legally can't do. So I really appreciate the work that you did. I echo Commissioner Sorensen. It was great lawyering. And I think that the work that I got to sit in on the last Travel Lane board meeting because Commissioner Farr had a conflict with the Poverty and Homeless Board. And their board is pretty happy with the conversations that's happened back and forth with our administrator and our legal counsel and trying to find a good solution, because we don't want to get to the point where we were last time, where a process got out of control, got assigned to a citizen committee, and kind of they did some things that weren't even really legal either when they tried to split an RFP process up, which wasn't defined in the RFP. Unless it's written into the RFP that you're going to split something, you can't split it. So that's issues that happen when we don't have good process. And I think the whole point was, let's start early, get a good process, and we won't be there having a room full of people directing to us making this grant award for 3 years to Travel Lane in the future. So I'll lend my support. This is just a discussion item to continuing on with working on the grant process and the 3-year grant, and I'll also lend my support to making it all of the 2.1 portion of the TRT for destination marketing, and putting that all in one bucket as far as the grant goes. I don't want to see us split that up right now. That can be maybe a future discussion for future boards, but I think we can move forward with those two things and continue your direct discussions with the Travel Lane folks, and then I guess you'll probably be coming back to the board with an actual, after you guys as staff issue an RFQ and you get your responses, we'll be coming back to the board for a decision on making award of that grant. But I'm pretty sure that based on the annual report we just heard, we'll be able to award it to a very high performing agency that's done a great job for the past several years. So if there's Commissioner Farr.
Just one last thing, and there's nothing else really needs to be said other than for the public trust. We are upholding our requirement as far as the public trust is concerned, because the grant it really is very specific about what TLC will do. As far as the specific allocations, it's not unlike the contract as far as the specific allocations are concerned, and record retention, audit, all of that is a part of it. But things that aren't a part of it, as it says here, the pages of indemnifications, employment requirements, copies of documents, insurance certificates, and other boilerplate contract requirements, since it's a grant and not a contract. So in other words, it takes a great deal of expensive overhead away from TLC and allows us to put our money directly into traveling, attracting vacationers. So the public trust is upheld in this. Thank you very much, Mr. Cheney, and thank you, Carrie, for your work on this.
Any further questions?
I would actually like to add one thing, since we were talking about the process from 2.5 years ago. I was involved in that process too, and to the extent that there were errors in empowerment, some of that happened on my advice as well. So I should say that I bear part of the responsibility for that as well. Thank you.
I don't think that was completely your fault, but I appreciate you taking some responsibility for that. I think we all take a little bit of responsibility, as it was actually under the direction of the administrator that worked for us that process happened. So, and it was at a time of little bit of transition, I think, in Lane County, that it all kind of some of the details fell off the table and it got sideways. So we worked it out, though, and now we're here and moving forward. Do you have what you need as far as sense of direction from the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, what I've heard is support from all the commissioners for moving forward with an RFQ process that will result in some form of a approximately 3-year rolling contract, rolling grant. We will have an agreement. I mean, I think it needs to be understood. We'll still solidify this, and it will come in the form of an agreement so that, that certainty and clarity will happen there with the regular performance auditing, the 2.1 points of TRT, and all the things that we discussed. I think the board's direction is pretty clear. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. So moving on, we have item 8A, which is a work session and direction regarding Lane Code Chapter 16 amendments, specifically same site definitions and building definition, temporary membrane structures, and this is in reference to ordinance number 1409. And I believe we have Lindsay Eichner, our associate planner, and it looks like we have Kent Howe, our interim planning director. So I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Eichner.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am here before you.
If you could drag the mic right up in front of you.
Sorry about that.
Very directional.
I will move that out of the way so I can get closer. Good morning. I'm here before you today because about a year ago we adopted some new code language to Lane Code Chapter 16, the zoning ordinance for the county, and we were appealed to the State Land Use Board of Appeals, also known as LUBA, on just a handful of the items that we proposed to change. In your packet, I provided the currently adopted language. I also provided the former definitions. The two definitions generally are in the farm and forest zone. We have a process for replacement dwellings. If they're located within a certain area right around the current dwelling, then they kind of get a pass and they don't have to address some of the major discretionary siting standards. If they're outside of that area, then they have more siting standards that they need. We need to look at to make sure that they're not impacting adjoining farm and forest uses, major habitat areas, things like that. So our currently adopted language increased that same site area. That was one of the points of contention of the appeal. The other item was to modify our definition of building to exempt temporary membrane structures, and we did that by adding in language that if the membrane structure or tent was regulated by the state fire code, meaning it was there for less than 180 days, then it would be exempt from the land use definition of building. If it was there longer than 180 days, then it would be considered a structure. There's a Court of Appeals case that calls out a tent as a structure. So we were appealed on that case, on that basis. So when we got appealed and we received the petitioner's brief, I met with legal counsel and we went over, what's the next step, and we concluded that there wasn't enough evidence in the record to proceed at LUBA, that they would, in fact, remand the decision back to the county, saying that there's not enough findings in the record. So we requested a voluntary remand so that we wouldn't waste staff time or resources on process. So we came back, we went to the Planning Commission, we asked for their input of, should we drop this language? Should we try to revise it? Should we come up with a whole new approach to these items? And so we had a couple work sessions with the Planning Commission, and what they forwarded was a recommendation to the board to move forward. They requested additional staff time and prioritization of the project to come up with clear and objective siting standards. So regardless of the distance for replacement dwellings specifically, regardless of the distance that, which is discretionary and arbitrary in nature, the distance away from the house. So we're before you today to get direction from the board to figure out where you would like us to take this appeal. Do we want to drop it and go back to the previous language? Do we want to explore modifying these standards? Staff definitely supports the position of the Planning Commission and agrees with them that these items definitely need to be looked at. We do differ in our view of how critical of changing these code provisions are. We are in the process of scoping and looking at the entire rewrite of Lane Code Chapter 16 as the board approved it on the long range work plan in July of this year. We're looking at doing a modernization and an update of Lane Code Chapter 14, which is our procedures ordinance, Lane Code Chapter 13, which is the land division, legal lots, property line adjustments, those regulations. And then, like I just said, we're doing scoping and design of revising and modernizing and updating Lane Code Chapter 16. And staff feels that it would be better time spent if we looked at replacement dwellings and whether a membrane structure is a building or not, when's it exempt from land use requirements at a more comprehensive level. And we might need to take a look at the siting standards, make sure they're consistent with state law for all uses in the farm zone and all uses in the forest zone. So we would, the options before you today are, we would request direction for staff to include the review of the same site definition and building definition in the long range work plan item 3.1. And item 3.1 is the update of Lane Code Chapter 16. And we would I lost track of where I was reading. As well as prepare a new ordinance to revert Lane Code Chapter 16 to the former definitions in the interim, because as staff has started scoping the project for Lane Code Chapter 16, it may take 3 to 5 years to get everything fully adopted. And so the code language that we have out there right now is limbo, I guess. I don't know how else to refer to it. We're not utilizing the definitions right now based off of the appeal at the state. Right?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. Those two items that Lindsay's been discussing, because of the remand, the planning department is not applying those definitions. That is, it's not current law because of the remand. In order to make those current law, we'd have to go through this remand process, and the board would have to approve it again.
As it stands now, the last item Lindsay was referring to was to, by ordinance, essentially make it clear that the language would go back to the way it was in the event that the board doesn't want to proceed right now with the sort of remand process, that is to, following the recommendation from LMD, to place this item more in line with the other Chapter 16 items to look at. It's really kind of an open question about whether, in my brain, whether we need to go through that formalization process to undo what we did before, or whether the remand essentially accomplishes that. But that's the issue now.
So we have this code out there. We're trying to figure out how to resolve it. Do we move forward right now with trying to come up and create a solution, not a solution, just a review and have a public participation outreach or public outreach and review to see, are these, does this code work? Does it not work? Can we create findings to justify support and consistency with state law, with the same site area definitions? Staff has also just received an email from the state, and you'll be getting a packet actually later this month before you, offering to partner. It's not a grant program, but it's to partner with DLCD to help update farm and forest zones. They've created some model farm and forest zones, and they are reaching out to counties to help they have a consultant on staff to help take their model zone ordinances that they've created and tailor them and help the local jurisdictions, or the counties, I should say, adopt a consistent farm and forest zone. So I haven't seen those, what the model zones look like. We're really interested in partnering with the state. That would also streamline the process of getting those zones updated at a faster level. So it would be before the estimated 3 to 5 years of before we would see an update in the farm and forest zones. So like I said, that you don't have to make a decision on partnering with the state today. That'll come to you in a packet later this month. But those are some things that are of why staff is supporting the idea of looking at the farm and forest zones holistically instead of piecemealing different definitions here and there. I also provided some permit statistics. I focused on comparing verification of replacement rights in the farm and forest zones versus permits that we receive for different land use actions related to Lane Code Chapter 13, which are the partitions, subdivisions, property line adjustments, legal lot verifications, validation of the unit of land. And in the last fiscal year of 14-15, we received 36 land use applications for replacement dwellings. 22% of those were the director level review for new site replacements, or they didn't have a building permit or tax records to prove that their house was replaceable. So 22% of the 36 we're using the same site area definition. Building permit wise, we had 31 building permits for replacement dwellings in the farm and forest zones within the last year. 3 of them, so less than 10%, were new site replacements. I actually pulled those 3 site plans up. One of them actually was in the same footprint. They changed their mind afterwards. So 2 out of 31 So I'm trying to bring the scale of this is important. We definitely want to look at these siting standards for replacement dwellings, help citizens out, save them money. But the priority we feel is to look at it in a more holistic view. The permits regarding Lane Code Chapter 13, 260 land use applications in 1 year. So 36, 260, there's a lot more citizens that are utilizing the Lane Code Chapter 13 provisions, and those really need to be addressed as well. So I'll let the board ask any questions of me, and thank you for your time.
So I'll start off with two quick questions, and then Commissioner Stewart's in the queue. The two alternatives basically deal with this, are alternative 1 and 2. And alternative 1 is the staff's recommendation to just do this under the current work plan, revert the code with a quick ordinance, and we'll just wait for that. And alternative 2 is kind of a sped up version of that. Can you just give me an idea of what the timeline is for alternative 1 to get to the process of where we'll actually have Chapter 16 coming before the Planning Commission and the board for adoption, those changes versus alternative 2, what the change in timeline is? And then secondary to that, if we were to go with alternative 2, what's the additional cost and what might be being bumped by that?
The partnership, if we move forward with the partnership with the state, they have a goal to, I want to say goal, I don't know if it's a requirement off the top of my head, but it's a goal, I know, to get all of the codes updated and adopted by, I believe it's May 2017. So that gives us a time frame, that gives us enough time to have public participate, to write the code, that, it works with us, have public outreach, get through the Planning Commission, public meetings process, to fine tune everything, then bring it before you to hopefully get it adopted by May of 2017. If we don't partner with the state, it may take a little bit longer, but I do think that the amount of properties in the county that are zoned farm and forest land, it's over 95% of the acreage of the county is farm and forest land. So we recognize that those zones would be a higher priority. I can't speak to, of exactly how the update of Lane Code Chapter 16 is going to go, because I have not been the main point person, but I know that we can't necessarily adopt the whole thing at one time. I think the idea was to adopt different sections and slowly work through that process. My guess, under the board's direction, we could definitely focus on those zones first. But it's hard to say if we don't partner with the state exactly how long it would be. It could be 5 years. Hopefully less, though. We're all optimistic in that. We have some good momentum going. So if we go with item 2, the other items on the work plan right now, staff is currently working on drafting some rules related to the new marijuana requirements. So that is top priority for staff right now, by your direction. So I would say that wouldn't necessarily get hurt by reprioritizing this project, but updating Lane Code Chapter 14, the annual legislative amendments, housekeeping amendments, those could potentially get pushed back. I'm actually hosting a work session with the Planning Commission on those amendments tonight, hopefully to have a public hearing before the Planning Commission later this month. And then one of the other projects would be the updating of Land Code Chapter 13. So I guess the overhaul of 13 and 14 would be pushed to the side for the moment while we worked on reprioritizing the project right now. We would have to go back through the public hearing process of the Planning Commission and then come back before you as well.
Thank you. I think that kind of answers my question. Commissioner Stewart?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lindsay, thank you. I guess my first question is, and if I understand it right, we made quite a few amendments to Chapter 16, if I remember rightly. And so are we, have we implemented the ones that haven't been challenged? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, yes. So in essence, I was concerned that everything that we had did, so like hardship structures and bringing the code into compliance with state law, was in limbo because of the challenge. So I appreciate that. I guess my direction as one member would be to, I think we should just prepare an ordinance that adopts, as you said, recommend in number one, adopts the old language for same site building, same site and the building definitions that we had. That being said, I still think and hopeful that maybe through this partnering with DLCD, when we see that there might be some opportunity to restructure some of these other things. As I expressed, the building site piece is kind of important to me. I think we missed the boat. I was more focused on the fact that I didn't want to approve more land, go from 2 acres to hypothetically to 5 acres for people to just build buildings however they wanted to do with a building permit. Was the fact that we actually recognize that people have geographical constraints, whether it's rivers, mountains, whatever. And maybe there's a different way to do it, to limit. I think I've shared this before in the past, maybe privately, not necessarily in a meeting piece, but if we take the limitation, say that the current site is 2 acres, and then we allow for some different configurations, instead of a square block placed over that house to have the accessory structures allowed, maybe we do like we do in the special use permits for farm and forest dwellings or forest dwellings, where we have a 2 acre rectangle that allows you to say, okay, here, pinpoint it's going to be plotted on a plot map, pinpoint where your home is, and that 2 acres is where what we consider to be your area of your home site. I think there's things that could be considered to maybe minimize the concern that was, wow, we're opening up this huge amount of additional building capacity on the sites. And then I also wonder if there is a way, it's pretty clear in the definition that, if I read the definition, that terms of building and structure under our current code, pretty much, okay, anything that's a structure. So if you got a 210 square foot tent and you're erecting that on your place, that's a structure. Well, I wonder if in our permitting process we have the flexibility to just say, okay, these types of structures, you can get an over-the-counter permit. There's events, and this is what's hard for me to understand in my mind why we're having this conversation is that I might go to a fundraiser event on somebody's farm that they came out and had parties to go, or whoever erect a 50 by 60 tent that's got hypothetically 30 tables under it, and it's an auction evening that's erected for 4 days and it's down and it's gone, that we even need to mess with that. But unfortunately, I think our code, the way I read it, maybe that's what it's called for. I'm not given the interpretation. But so maybe in the short term, maybe we can have a permitting process that gives us some flexibility on the type of structures that people come in, and really drastically condense time of analysis and that based on what the application brings, and then have that longer term when we can afford it type of a process to say, we really don't even need to dabble with this type of a situation. But so I'm supportive of the recommendation that you approved. Let's just get our ordinance back to what it was. And then I think we have other opportunities to address those other two items, whether it's a partnership or maybe we just can do it with our billing process. Maybe we just say there's 0 fee and just notice us that you're going to put up a 2-day structure or something and move on. I'll leave that to staff to figure out. And then I would say that it's nice that DLCD is listening. I've been on their local elected official advisory committee for 3 years, I think, maybe 4, going on my 4th. And I have continually talked to them about the hardship that is placed upon counties like ours that have outdated codes or, chapters in our codes that, maybe don't necessarily meet the intent of today's needs. And it would sure be nice if DLCD could help us come up with some model code to help us streamline our process and meet today's intent instead of 1975 or 84. So I'm not going to claim any credit, but I'm glad that they did hear that, at least my voice and probably multiple others in offering that up. So I look forward to seeing what you have to present in the near future.
So I'll just lend my support to alternative 1 based on the explanation of what alternative 2 would do. It just does seem silly to me, though, that, I'm not quite sure if I throw my tent up after a camping trip to dry out whether I've erected an illegal structure, or whether the umbrella over my patio table qualifies as a structure. But
I could speak to that. It's just for land use. The definition is just for land use. Building code remains building code, whether or not you need a permit for it.
I meant under Chapter 16, though,
Yeah.
whether it would be an illegal structure under Chapter 16. So with that, are there any further questions for staff?
Real quickly, Mr. Chair. So just recently at Langdon Farms, and so the proposed golf course that University of Oregon is looking at, I think that must be, where is that? The southwest of Crestwell, is that correct?
Northwest.
Northwest of Crestwell. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm curious, when you look at our code, like Langdon Farms was, I believe I read was the last conditional use permit allowed for a golf course to be built in EFU zoning. Is this proposed golf course in EFU zoning? And then if that's the case, how do you deal with potential permanent structures that would be in a sense going on that facility? Just out of curiosity, not that that necessarily relates to this, but in a sense, I mean, Commissioner Stewart just brought up about the fact that, we're looking at, codes that have been around for quite some time. And I think this board is interested in really pursuing the idea of we're in the 21st century and things are beginning to change dramatically, whether we like it or not, and how do we continue to potentially adapt to that. So just out of curiosity, and by the way, I'm supportive as well as alternative 1 as well on this particular piece. But
Temporary structures or permanent structure, like big tents for the event?
Well, there may be big tents. There may be, you're going to have a permanent clubhouse. You're going to have all of that. And because Langdon Farms, they just had an NCAA women's golf tournament. So while they had the permanent structures, they also had tents. They had temporary tent structures as well, all throughout there. It's obviously allowed because of what was granted, when it was built. But are we going to, do we have to go, to me, that's a precedent that's been set, so what are some possibilities that may come out of this project outside of Crestwell?
There's a couple of things that are in your question. One is the golf course that's proposed for the University of Oregon on exclusive farm use owned land, and yes, it is. It meets the requirements of the law at the time they made their application, so it's all fine. From the standpoint of the tent structures, that was a narrow decision, and Andy may want to speak to this, but the decision was regarding a farm stand using a tent. And that's when the LUBA ruled that that's a structure and it has to comply with the building code to be used as a farm stand. I think we can define in our code that you can't use tents as farm stands, and then by definition they can be used for other things. So I think we can get around it. It's a narrow decision right now. I think you can say it applies in that county in the EFU zone to farm stands, and that's the extent of it.
We do have the accessory uses and structure provision. So if once the golf course is established and they're having an event, a tent structure could be considered, potentially be considered an accessory use, and then we would look to building the fire code to determine the size, the amount of occupancy, things like that, if it would require a building permit or not. The planning requirements would most likely be setbacks, not too close to the river, things like that, if it is considered a structure.
I appreciate that.
But we could, we're not going to ban.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And that question doesn't relate to what we're talking about here necessarily at all. It's just, Commissioner Stewart mentioned the dates of 1975 or 1984.
Yeah.
And here we are in 2015.
Yeah, we'll still definitely have our constraints of the state laws.
Sure.
But hopefully we'll make it much more user-friendly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So if there are no further questions, can I get a motion?
Oh, we need a motion?
Yeah, I think the request was for one of those three motions, so.
All right, well, I would move approval of alternative one, which is to direct staff to include the review of the same site definition and building definition to the long-range work plan item 3.1, as well as to prepare a new ordinance to revert Lane Code Chapter 16 to include the former same site and building definitions for the interim.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion to the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Sorensen absent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
So that gets us on down to item 9A, announcements from commissioners. Any announcements? Commissioner Farr.
Just a sad announcement. For many years, I worked with Scott Meisner, Eugene City Councilor and Planning Commission member. He's also worked in public service in so many different ways. Scott passed away on Friday evening, and had friends and family with him, and Scott will be missed.
Any other announcements? I would echo missing Scott from the community. He also served on our Board of Property Tax Appeals for many years and was a great member of that board. Truly a civic-minded person. So with that, we'll get down to agenda team requests. Are there any agenda team requests? I have two I want to mention. The first one is a request from a citizens group. They're kind of organized as Veneta Crime Watch. Would like to have a work session with the board on the formation of a possible public safety district in the Fern Ridge area. This is similar to the request of OSU Extension to talk about a possible levy, or some other organizations like the Parks District asking us for a work session. And I would like to honor these citizens in their effort to try and deal with crime in the Veneta area. If I can get a couple more head nods with that one.
That's important.
Looks like we have 4 head nods. The second one is we were discussing during our annual report from Travel Lane County about looking at lane code relative to TRT and how that impacts the collection from users of Airbnb and VRBO and other non-standard ways of booking in-home stays and all that, and was wondering if that's something that the board would support, maybe having a work session on in the future, and having maybe legal counsel take a quick look at that section of our code.
I would. And with 2021 coming, I think we're going to see a lot of people who are going to be offering their homes for
well, I see 3 head nods, myself and Commissioner Sand. Looks like 4. So we got 4 head nods on both of those. Is there any other agenda team requests? Then we'll move to review of assignments.
Well, those 2 that you just mentioned, the Veneta, I should say the Public Safety District concept in Fern Ridge, and we'll work with the Veneta Crime Watch group to schedule that work session. I understand they have a meeting, I think October 12th, so sometime after that. The TRT collection work session, I would note that I've been planning to bring that topic up at our cell breakfast. It was canceled last week, so I'll bring that up at the next cell breakfast, and with our regional partners, particularly in Springfield and Eugene, and then schedule a work session for the board. And then finally, the follow-up on Traveling County and the RFQ grant process that we laid out today. We'll report back, obviously, to the board at a future date on that.
Great. Any other assignments? See none. Any other business for the board? If not, we will adjourn, and we will reconvene tomorrow at 9 for a work session upstairs. We're adjourned.
We still have 2 minutes.